The backhanded compliment reflex. You just told someone about a promotion and they said, "Wow, that's amazing. I could never manage that schedule, but good for you for being able to handle it." Notice what happened? The praise arrived with an escape hatch. It came wrapped in a small dig about your capacity, your ability to cope, your willingness to burn out. If you sat with that sentence too long, it started to itch. Envy has tells, and one of them is the reflex to compliment you while also cutting you down. It feels like friendliness, because half of it genuinely is. The speaker really did mean the "that's amazing" part, but the part that follows, the "but," the "yeah but," the soft qualification, that is the envy working. The mind is trying to level a playing field that feels uneven. If you got something they wanted, the simplest emotional move is to make it less shiny. What makes this so sticky is that the person often has no idea they are doing it. They are not plotting. Their brain is just working to remind both of you that your win comes with a burden, a flaw, a reason it is not actually that great. Not by attacking it outright, that would be too raw, but by tying it to a cost. Listen for the pattern, not just the words. Does someone consistently land praise on you, then immediately attach a weight to it? Does their tone shift mid-sentence? That reflex is often less about you and more about the gap they feel between your life and theirs. When you see it, you know you have something they want. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. Delayed congratulations. You'll land the job. Your phone lights up, text within minutes, everyone fast and genuine. Then there's that one person. 2 days pass, 3, then suddenly, "Oh hey, congrats on that thing." The emoji feels thin. The timing feels wrong. You can't name it, but something sits off in your chest. Envy doesn't live in silence alone. It lives in lag. When someone feels the sting of your win, their first move isn't to vanish. It's to vanish long enough to swallow the feeling, then resurface with what looks like warmth, but reads like obligation. The delay is the confession. It's the gap between what they feel underneath and what they've decided to show you instead. Notice the pattern over time. Do they congratulate you instantly on small things, a new haircut, a book recommendation, but sit quiet for weeks on the promotion? That lag reveals something. Small wins don't trigger envy. Big ones do. And the bigger the win, the longer they need to process it, because the bigger the gap between what they wanted and what you now have. Here's where it gets complicated. They will eventually congratulate you, so guilt creeps in. You start to doubt your own radar. They seem fine, and fine seeming can make you question what you actually felt. But that instinct is real data, not proof they wish you harm, but proof something real moved through them. Someone genuinely rooting for you doesn't need a processing delay to arrive. If they matter to you, the timing becomes worth listening to. Envy is present in the room whether they speak its name or not, and knowing that changes how you interpret the warmth that follows. Subject change after your win. You just told someone close to you about a promotion. There's a beat, a second where they're supposed to say something warm. Instead, "Oh, nice. Hey, did you see that new show?" It lands like a cold hand on your chest, and you're left wondering if you imagined the deflation in their voice. What you're spotting is a flinch. When someone envies you, celebrating your wins feels like swallowing glass. The generous move would be to sit with that discomfort, to ask questions, to let your moment exist. Some people can't do it, so they jump ship fast. They change the subject, not because they forgot, but because they need to escape the feeling. The tell isn't rudeness, it's the speed and the lightness, like they're testing whether you noticed. A real friend might need a moment to adjust, sure, but they come back. They ask follow-up questions. They make space for you. Someone feeling envy? They're already mentally somewhere else, somewhere the spotlight isn't on you. If you notice this pattern, quick subject pivots after your news, especially on wins that matter, it's not paranoia. It's a sign someone's managing an uncomfortable emotion they haven't named. You don't need to call them out, but you can start paying closer attention to who celebrates you and who performs it. That difference? It shapes everything. The sticky part: don't shrink your wins to make others comfortable. You'll attract the wrong people that way. Share big things with people who've proven they can be generous. Let the other ones sit with their envy. That's their work, not yours. Minimizing your achievement. You just told someone close to you about a win, a promotion, a sale, a thing you built that worked. Their response lands flat. Oh, that's nice, but honestly, anyone could have done that. Or they pivot fast to someone else's bigger thing. The subtext hangs in the air like smoke. What's happening is visceral. They cannot sit with your moment without immediately shrinking it. Not because they're consciously cruel, but because your win creates a small gap between you two, and envy hates gaps. So the brain does what it does. It flattens the thing, talks down its difficulty, reminds you and itself that it was luck or timing, or honestly, no big deal. You'll spot something telling if you pay attention. They rarely do this with others. When a third person achieves something, they might even celebrate it warmly. But your achievement, it gets the reduction treatment because you matter to them enough that your rise feels like their fall. The closer you are, the harder they work to unsee your success. Watch the timing. They minimize right after you share, almost automatically, not because they've thought it through, but because the envy alarm went off and their mouth moved to disarm it. Notice whether they do this consistently only with your wins, never with failures or neutral updates. That pattern is the fingerprint. The sticky part: someone who truly envies you will often work harder to seem unaffected, which means the minimizing becomes more aggressive, more frequent. It's not malice. It's a nervous system trying to restore balance. Knowing that doesn't make it feel better, but it does make it real. And real, you can work with. The forced smile tell. You tell someone good news, a promotion, a relationship milestone, something that genuinely matters. Their mouth curves upward, but their eyes stay flat, unreaching. The smile moves across their face like it belongs to someone else, animated only from the lips down. That dissonance between the upper and lower face is a signal worth catching. Real joy creases the corners of the eyes. It happens automatically, wired into your nervous system. When someone is actually happy for you, the whole face moves together like an orchestra. When envy sits underneath, the voluntary muscles perform on cue, but the involuntary ones remain still. They smile because society expects it, not because delight is happening anywhere in their body. You probably felt that wrongness in the room, a tiny discord you couldn't quite name. The harder truth is that envious people are usually not lying to you on purpose. They genuinely want to seem supportive, want to be the person who celebrates with you, but the body does not follow the script for long. The smile holds too long or collapses too fast. Sometimes it appears, and then immediately they look away, as if their own expression needs to be hidden. These small temporal glitches, the delayed arrival, the early exit, the eyes fleeing, are where their composure leaks. Watch what their face does when you stop making direct eye contact or in the moment right after you finish speaking. That is the unguarded window. The envy lives not in the smile itself, but in the gap between what they are trying to project and what they cannot quite contain. See it once, and you cannot unsee it again. One-upping every story. You mention a trip to Portugal. They light up. Oh, they went to Portugal and Spain, 5 weeks, private villa. You got a promotion. They had one last year and turned it down for something better. You finally learned to make bread. They've been doing sourdough since the pandemic, have their own starter with a name. It's never quite malice. It's just that every victory of yours needs a sequel featuring them as the lead. What's happening here is less about the story and more about the latter. When someone one-ups you consistently, they're not actually listening to you. They're measuring themselves against you. And every time you inch up, they inch up faster, or at least they have to tell it that way. The energy feels off because it is off. You came to share. They came to compete. The trap is thinking this means they don't like you. Sometimes it does, but just as often it means they like you and feel smaller in the light you cast. That combination makes people talk faster, claim bigger things, rewrite their own lives to fit the size of yours. Envy doesn't always look like resentment. Sometimes it sounds like enthusiasm that's just a little too loud. Next time you catch someone doing this, notice what you feel. Probably a tightness, maybe deflated. That gut reading is real data. You don't owe them silence about it, but you also don't need to call them out. Just start talking a little less to them about the things that matter. Let the one-uppers one-up the weather instead. Silence when you shine. You just landed something good, a promotion, a compliment from someone who matters, a win you've been grinding toward. You turn to share it with someone close, expecting the usual warmth. Instead, they go quiet, not awkward quiet, just absent. They smile a beat too late, say, "That's nice," and then suddenly they're looking at their phone or remembering they need to do something else. That silence is not neutral. Envy doesn't always roar. Most of the time, it just stops talking. When someone secretly resents your good fortune, their genuine joy has nowhere to go, so they swallow it. The conversation flatlines. They cannot celebrate you without admitting, even to themselves, that something in them wanted that thing instead. The flatness you hear is not indifference. It's the sound of swallowed feeling. Watch for the pattern. Do certain people light up when you stumble but dim when you win? Do they ask quick questions about your success, but never the follow-up questions that show real interest? Do they move the conversation away from you faster when the news is good? That's not shyness or being busy. That's the weight of wishing it was them instead. The tricky part is that they might not even know they're doing it. Envy is often unconscious, sitting under a smile that looks almost normal. But you'll feel the difference. Real friends have a texture to their interest. Envious people have a flatness, a politeness that tastes like resignation or defeat. Next time someone goes quiet on your good news, notice how long the silence lasts before they change the subject. That pause, that small dead air, often says more than words ever could. Overpraising to mask resentment. You get a promotion and someone who should feel happy for you suddenly becomes a cheerleader. Too loud, too fast. Oh my God, you deserve it so much. You're literally the most talented person I know. The words feel bright and hot, almost feverish. Then they disappear. No follow-up, no real interest in how it's actually going. What you're hearing is a performance. When envy is too sharp to admit, some people will overshoot into praise instead, not because they mean it, but because false enthusiasm is easier to say than resentment. It's a mask that feels safe. To them, the praise sounds generous. To you, it might just feel hollow if you listen underneath the volume. The real tell is always the gap between the theater and the after. Watch what happens when you bring up your win a second time. Does their interest crater? Do they suddenly find something else to talk about? Do they start comparing, mentioning their own accomplishment, or quickly pivoting to someone else's success? That shift from overblown praise to sudden disinterest is where the actual story lives. Overpraising burns fast because it's exhausting to perform. Most people can't sustain it. They'll slack off, go quiet, or eventually let some small barbed comment slip through the cracks. If you notice someone whose compliments feel rehearsed or oddly scene-stealing, where the praise is more about them appearing generous than truly celebrating you, that's often your signal that something underneath isn't clean. The competitive question. Your friend asks how much you paid for your apartment, or your new role, your vacation, your course. On the surface, it's casual, almost curious, but notice the timing. It usually lands right after you've mentioned something good. And notice the silence that follows your answer, not the comfortable kind. What's happening is a comparison calculation. The envious person isn't asking because they're happy for you. They're asking because they need to know exactly where you sit relative to them. They need the number so they can run it against their own life and see if they're winning or losing. The question feels friendly because it's phrased as interest, but it's actually a measuring tape. You'll recognize it because the follow-up is rarely genuine curiosity. Instead, it's a small qualifier. Oh, that's cool, with a slight flatness, or worse, a quick pivot to their own version. That's interesting, but when I did something similar, that redirection is the tell. They wanted the data so they could recalibrate their own story to stay ahead of yours. The tricky part is that this person may not even know they're doing it. Envy isn't always a conscious choice. It's often an automatic nervous system response. Someone sees you move forward and their brain immediately asks, "Am I still okay?" The competitive question is just their way of getting an answer. Watch for it, answer simply if you choose to, and notice how rarely they ask the follow-up questions that real interest would demand. Downplaying your effort. You just landed a big promotion. You spent 3 months preparing for it. Late nights, careful strategy, a risky conversation with your manager. When you tell someone close to you, they nod and say, "Oh, they probably needed to fill the spot anyway." Or, "You got lucky with the timing." Their tone is light, friendly even, but they didn't ask a single question about how you did it. What's happening here is a quiet form of threat reduction. When someone feels threatened by your win, their brain doesn't want to acknowledge your role in it, because if you earned it through skill and effort, that means they could too, and the fact that they didn't stings. So they shrink the thing you did. They redistribute the credit to luck, circumstance, or accident. Anything but you. It's not that they're consciously choosing to lie. Their mind is just protecting them from a painful comparison. The person downplaying your work might be genuinely unaware they're doing it, but awareness doesn't change the effect. Each time they shrink your achievement, they're sending a message. Your effort doesn't matter. Your win wasn't real. You didn't actually do much. Hear it enough, and you start to believe it yourself. That erosion is the real damage, not the comment, but what it plants in you. An envious person needs you to feel small, because that's the only way they can feel less small by comparison. Watch the pattern. They'll celebrate things others got by luck or timing, but the wins you clearly engineered, those get the flattest, quietest response. That flatness is the tell. It's not coldness. It's fear wearing a friendly mask, and it shows exactly where the envy lives. Sudden interest in your flaws. You mention you bombed a presentation at work. Normal reaction, sympathy, maybe a joke to lighten it. Envious reaction. Suddenly, they're asking detailed questions. What exactly did you say wrong? Did people notice right away? How bad was the feedback? It feels like concern, but it has teeth. What's actually happening is quieter than you'd think. When someone envies you, your wins sting. But your failures, those feel like relief, proof that you're not as untouchable as you seemed. So they dig. They want the full picture of your mess because it shrinks the distance between you and them. It's comforting to them, even if the intensity of their questions feels uncomfortable to you. The pattern shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. A friend who normally doesn't care suddenly becomes fascinated by your relationship struggles, your money problems, your insecurities. They ask follow-up questions most people wouldn't. They remember the small shame you mentioned once in passing and bring it up again, softly, like they're checking if the wound is still there. Here's what matters. Jealous people need to believe you're flawed so badly that it actually changes how they listen. They lean in on the negative with an intensity that's different from normal human curiosity. The energy shifts. It feels like hunger. If someone's interest in your difficulties spiked without reason, especially alongside compliments that feel hollow, notice it. You don't need to call it out or fight about it. Just don't volunteer your failures to them the way you might to someone who's actually rooting for you to win, mirroring, then mocking. You tell them you've started jogging before work. A week later, they mention their new 5 a.m. runs, but with a laugh that somehow makes it sound ridiculous. They copy your phrase, your outfit color, the way you order coffee. Then they do it just slightly off or exaggerated, like a caricature of you. Watch long enough and the pattern becomes unmistakable. This is the tell. Envy wears a mask of imitation first. When someone genuinely admires you, they admire openly or ask how you do it. But the envious person mirrors without permission. They absorb your moves, your confidence, your wins. Then they deflate it with a wink, a smirk, a tiny exaggeration that signals, I can do this too, but look how silly it actually is. The mockery isn't always mean. Sometimes it's gentle, even funny. That's what makes it dangerous. You second-guess yourself. Was I being pretentious? Did that actually look dumb? The joke lands, laughter fills the room, and you've been quietly undermined by someone who wanted what you had just enough to steal the shape of it. They needed to prove two things at once: that your thing is copyable, so it's not special, and that doing it better means doing it differently, so they're still separate, still safe from your gravity. Mockery becomes their escape hatch. Next time you see the mirror then joke pattern, don't laugh along automatically. Notice it. That person is working harder than they should have to, which tells you exactly what they think you have. The comparison trap. You know that person who always seems to know your win before you've even finished telling them? They nod, smile, say the right things, and then somehow the conversation pivots to what they achieved, or what they're working toward, or what's actually harder in their world. It's not cruel. It's just their wins keep appearing in the space where your moment used to be. What's happening underneath is a quiet reflex. When someone envies you, your good news doesn't land as good news for you. It lands as a measuring stick. They're not celebrating, they're calculating. How far ahead are you? What does that say about where they stand? The comparison runs instantly, almost invisibly, and the urge to close that gap becomes urgent in their chest. You'll notice it most when you mention something concrete, a trip, a job offer, a skill you picked up. They don't ask about your experience. They jump to the logistics, the timeline, the cost, the difficulty. They're not gathering information about you. They're gathering evidence about whether they could do it too and how fast. It feels like interest, but it's reconnaissance. Here's what matters. Envious people often turn your achievements into homework for themselves, but they'll do it quietly, and then they'll mention their version of the same thing, casually, as if it was already in motion. The timeline is always convenient, the details always vague, the comparison always just close enough to sting. Notice whether someone asks about the thing itself or about the gap. One is genuine curiosity. The other is someone building their own ladder while watching yours get taller. That difference is worth paying attention to. 100 hidden signs someone secretly envies you, even if they act friendly. You watch their face when you mention the promotion, the trip, the good news. 3 seconds of light, real light, then it drains. The congratulations come out, but softer. They lean back. Their body language shifts like someone who just remembered they have somewhere else to be. Not rudeness, something quieter and more precise than that. What just happened is the collision between their reflex reaction and what they're actually feeling underneath. The first spark is honest. They can't fake that initial response. But the shutdown that follows is the edit. Envy hates the spotlight, so it kills the warmth before anyone can name what was there. Here's the thing. People genuinely rooting for you stay present. They ask the follow-up questions. They want details, timelines, what it felt like. Their curiosity pulls them forward. But when envy moves through someone, curiosity dies instead. The moment becomes uncomfortable for them. Sitting with your win means sitting with their own lack. So they pivot, they deflect, they need air. The real tell isn't the congratulations themselves, it's the durability. Does someone's warmth persist across the next conversation, the one after that? Or does their enthusiasm collapse the moment they register what you've gained? The first kind of person is celebrating you. The second is managing their own feelings in real time, and that gap between the two is the giveaway that lasts. Notice who stays warm across time and who develops sudden plans whenever your good news surfaces. Selective memory of your failures. You bomb a presentation at work, fumble the words, miss a deadline, show up late to something that mattered. A week later, your envious friend asks how the big meeting went, and they remember the mess in vivid detail. They bring it up again at dinner, and again when someone new joins the group. It's like they took a photograph of the moment and pinned it to their bedroom wall. Here's what happens beneath the surface. Envy has a peculiar way of amplifying your stumbles while erasing your wins. An envious person's brain doesn't file your failures the same way it files everyone else's. They keep yours in a highlight reel, easy to access, ready to mention, impossible to forget. Meanwhile, when you succeed at something, that memory gets fuzzy around the edges. It slips away or gets reframed as pure luck, timing, or help from others. The cruel part is they might not even know they're doing it. It's not calculated, it's automatic. Your failures feel significant to them because they prove something their anxiety needs to believe, that you're not as untouchable as they secretly fear. So their brain glues itself to those moments and lets the actual wins dissolve into nothing. The quiet tell. They remember your embarrassments better than you do. They can name the date, the details, the room you were in, what you were wearing. But ask them about the time you crushed something, launched something, won something, and suddenly their memory goes soft and vague. That selective precision is the fingerprint of envy wearing a friendly smile. The credit-stealing habit. You pitch an idea in a meeting. It lands. A week later, someone you thought was your ally brings it back to the table as their own work, delivered with such smooth confidence that half the room forgets you ever spoke. They weren't lying exactly. They were just rewriting the story to fit themselves into the hero's seat. Watch for the pattern more than the single theft. Someone envious doesn't usually announce plagiarism. They rewire the narrative instead. Your research becomes what I found. Your solution becomes what I realized. The credit grab happens so quietly that calling it out makes you look paranoid or petty. That silence is actually the strategy. The real tell is what happens after the win lands. A genuinely secure person remembers who brought what to the table. An envious one benefits from a selective memory. They'll publicly credit others for their failures or minor contributions. It keeps them looking magnanimous, while your wins slip into the collective we, where your name dissolves. Check who takes whose credit and who claims whose losses. If someone takes your wins and hands you their failures, envy is driving that bus. The move here isn't dramatic. Stop volunteering context in those early pitch moments. Say less, write more, share ideas in email or documents when you can, not because you need to build a case against them, though sometimes you do, but because it makes the theft messier to pull off. A person who envies you will always search for angles, but you don't have to hand them the shortcut. A little friction redirects envy toward easier targets. Vague future promises. You mention something good happening, a trip, a job, a chance, and they light up. They're suddenly your biggest cheerleader. We should totally do that together, they say. I'm so here for this. Let's make it happen. But when you try to pin down a date, a time, actual next steps, the energy vanishes. Suddenly, they're too busy, too uncertain, or they float away into non-committal land. Here's what lives in that gap between enthusiasm and follow-through. They want to feel close to your good thing. They want to be inside the win. But the prospect of actually being there, of being your support, of celebrating with you, creates a quiet friction, because attending your success means watching it happen. And that's harder than imagining a future where you both succeed together. Envy hides in the vague promise. It keeps them tethered to your good news without making them complicit in your joy. They get to feel like a good friend, in theory, while staying emotionally safe from the sting of being a bystander to someone else's moment. Watch for the pattern. Excitement that deflates the moment logistics enter the room. Watch for promises that never quite solidify into actual plans. These aren't signs of a flake. They're signs of someone who wants to celebrate you, but only in a daydream where their role is easier than it actually is. The vagueness is the tell. Next time someone makes that bright, open-ended promise, don't push them to commit. Instead, let it breathe. Notice whether they follow up or whether the energy simply evaporates into silence. That absence of a next step, that's your answer. Withholding useful information. You ask a colleague who figured out a shortcut at work how they did it. They smile, say it was nothing special, and change the subject. Later, you watch them explain every step of that same technique to someone they like. That silence wasn't shyness, it was a choice. When someone envies you, information becomes currency. They keep close. They might know the recruiter's name, the database password, the therapist who actually has openings, the timing that makes a real difference. But you don't get the call. You get the friendly deflection instead. It's not loud enough to fight about, just enough to slow you down while they move forward. What makes this so hard to catch is that withholding can look identical to normal forgetfulness. Did they genuinely forget? Did they assume you wouldn't care? You'll probably give them the benefit of the doubt once, twice, maybe longer. But if the pattern is selective, they share freely with some people and stay quiet with you. That's your actual answer. The envier doesn't want you to crash. They just don't want you to leap ahead. Keeping you slightly behind, slightly out of the loop, feels like balance to them, a small way to stay in control when they feel you've already won without trying. The real signal isn't a single withheld fact. It's who volunteers information without being asked, and who only shares what they're forced to reveal. Pay attention to that difference. It says everything about whether someone is rooting for you or quietly betting against your next move. The eye roll microexpression. You just told someone about a win, maybe a promotion, a new relationship, a thing you worked hard for. Their face does something small. Their eyes go up and to the side for less than a second, then reset to normal. It happened so fast, you almost didn't catch it. But you felt it. That flicker is a micro-expression, and it's one of the body's most honest tells. Envy burns hot, but it also burns fast. When someone hasn't had time to put on their social mask, their real reaction leaks out. The eye roll, especially that upward sideways roll, is contempt mixed with dismissal. It's the automatic gesture of someone whose brain just registered, "You got something I didn't, and that bothers me." The roll says, "Please," without speaking it. What makes this sneaky is that it passes in a fraction of a second. The person themselves might not even be aware it happened. Their conscious mind stays friendly. They follow up with, "Oh, that's cool," or "Good for you." But their nervous system has already told you the truth. They're not angry, they're envious. And envy hates being on the outside. The body doesn't lie the way words do. It won't rehearse. It won't apologize. That split-second roll is pure signal. No filter, no script. You're not imagining things or reading too much into it. You're reading a leak in their performance, a glimpse of what they're working hard to keep buried. If you see this flicker, trust it. The question is what you do with it. Don't call it out. That just makes them defensive and better at hiding next time. Just notice it. Notice who rolls when you shine. Those are the people whose support comes with an asterisk, and that information is worth keeping. Praising rivals in front of you. Your coworker leans over at lunch and says, "Did you see what Marcus just landed? The guy's an absolute machine. That campaign was genius." You nod, and they keep going. More praise, more detail, more emphasis on how talented he is. The thing is, Marcus is someone you're competing with for the same promotion. When someone envies you, they often flip into praising your competitors or people similar to you in front of your face. It sounds like they're being generous or fair-minded, but there's a quiet hostility underneath. They're not really celebrating Marcus. They're using Marcus as a weapon, a way to remind you that you're not the only talented one in the room. that your worth is not a given. The pattern shows up in different flavors. They highlight flaws in your work while amplifying strengths in someone else's. They bring up someone else's achievements unprompted, especially when you've just had a win. They might even do it with a smile, making it sound like gentle observation, but the timing and intensity reveal the actual emotion. They're trying to shrink your sense of your own value. If you catch this happening, pay attention to who they're praising and when. Is it always in moments when you've done something good? Does the praise feel genuine, or does it come with a little edge? The envier often doesn't realize they're being transparent. They're so focused on deflating you that they leave evidence everywhere. Here's what matters. Their need to keep pumping up someone else is proof that your wins are landing harder than they want to admit. Discomfort with your good news. You get a promotion, land a client, meet someone special, and you call them excited. There's a pause on the other end. Not the pause of surprise. The pause of someone swallowing something. Then they say, "Congratulations," but their voice drops half an octave. The words are right. The feeling is wrong. That flatness isn't shyness or tiredness. An envious person lives in a zero-sum world where your win feels like their loss. So when you celebrate, you're not just sharing joy, you're waving proof of something they want and don't have. They feel smaller by comparison. Their brain does quick math. If you're up, where does that leave them? The gap between what they have and what you have just got harder to ignore. Watch what they do next. Do they ask follow-up questions or change the subject fast? Do they add a small criticism, "That's great, but the commute must be brutal," or "Hope it doesn't stress you out"? These aren't cautions. They're tiny anchors, dragging your good news down to their level. They need your win to feel less clean, less pure, less like something to actually want. The real tell is what doesn't happen. They don't tell other people. They don't celebrate with you. They don't ask how you're feeling or what's next. Instead, there's a weird distance, like you've crossed a line they can't follow. That distance is envy doing its work. It separates, cools, withdraws. Pay attention to who stays warm when you shine. Those are the people who want you up there, not because it costs them anything, but because they actually do. Pity disguised as concern. You've just landed something good, a promotion, a new relationship, a win you've been working toward. And then someone close leans in with that stretched out voice. But how are you really doing? Like they've already seen through the announcement to the collapse they know is coming. That tone, gentle, protective, almost mournful, is not what it pretends to be. It's envy, wearing a doctor's coat. Here's what's actually happening. They've decided you're fragile, drowning underneath the appearance of luck. The concern is the wrapping. Inside, it sits doubt about every choice you made to get here. Aren't you worried that? Or, I just hope you're not getting in over your head. They're softly, kindly telling you your good thing is built on sand, that you're naive to believe it's real. It sounds protective. It feels like friendship, but it's someone working to shrink your moment so it stops casting a shadow. Watch when this happens. Does the worry drop right after your announcement? Does it come from someone who never actually celebrates with you, who saves their warmth for your stumbles? That pattern isn't accidental. They're practicing a clean form of sabotage. Lower your confidence in one breath, and they don't have to feel the gap between you and them anymore. The move is to notice the timing and texture. Real care checks in after a good week. Envy disguised as pity rushes in while you're still warm from the win, asking you to cool down, second guess, shrink. You don't owe them reassurance. When someone offers that particular brand of concern, you can simply nod and keep walking toward what you wanted. Their doubt was never the point. Excessive advice giving. There's a version of helpfulness that doesn't quite feel helpful. You mention a promotion, a new relationship, a personal project, and suddenly someone is in your ear with cautions, corrections, better ways to do it. They smile while they do it, frame it as care, but the timing and volume feel different. It's as if they're trying to shrink the space you just claimed, to fold your win back down to size. Envy travels disguised as guidance. When someone envies you, they often can't bear to let your good news exist unqualified. The corrective advice serves a real function. It chips away at your confidence just enough that your win feels less clean, less purely yours. You leave the conversation wondering if you should have thought it through more, even though you had. That small seed of doubt was the point. Pay attention to the ratio and rhythm. Does this person offer advice to everyone equally, or does the torrent specifically arrive when you've announced something good? The envious version comes hot and fast, immediate and unloaded, as if they've been waiting for you to stumble. Real mentorship doesn't usually feel like a deflation. It lands lighter. Ask questions instead of insisting. The trap is that you might internalize it as genuine concern and start second-guessing yourself. But when someone treats your wins as a problem to be managed rather than a moment to be celebrated, you're watching envy dressed up as care. Don't let it borrow your doubt. Correcting your minor mistakes. You misspeak a word. You get a date wrong. You're not talking to anyone in particular. Maybe you're just thinking out loud with a friend. Then they jump in with the correction, sometimes before you've even finished the sentence. Not meanly, but fast. A little too fast. Here's what's happening. When someone envies you, they are running a background process looking for cracks, not to help you, to level the playing field in their own mind. If you're brilliant at your job, they catch you messing up a detail. If you seem confident, they note the stutter. It's automatic, barely conscious. They are collecting evidence that you are human, flawed, less than. The rhythm matters here. A genuine friend will often let small errors slide or correct them gently later when it matters. But the envier corrects immediately and publicly, like they've been waiting for it. There's almost relief in their voice. Finally, proof the pedestal isn't as high as they thought. Pay attention to the ones who seem to brighten when you fumble, not the ones who help you recover, the ones whose energy seemed dimmer before you made the mistake. That shift tells you they were not rooting for your success. They were rooting against it. You don't need to confront every envier. You just need to see them clearly so their small corrections stop feeling like friendship and start feeling like what they are, the joking insult. You laugh at something someone said about you, and for a second, your face goes hot. They frame it as a joke, maybe even deliver it with a smile, but the words had teeth. You know it. They know it. Everyone in the room pretends they don't. This is the joking insult. That hybrid creature that lives in the gap between cruelty and plausible deniability. When you call it out, they act wounded. It was just a joke. Why are you being so sensitive? But jokes that land directly on your exact insecurity, your exact win, your exact thing that matters, those are not accidents. Envy loves the joke format because it gets to wound and escape in the same breath, leaving no fingerprints. The pattern shows up in specificity. a casual jab about your body, your relationship, your job, your luck, aimed at something you actually care about. If they were truly indifferent to your success, why sharpen themselves into humor? Why reach for that particular tender spot? Indifference does not do that kind of precision work. What makes it stick is the smile. The smile says, "I like you," while the words say something else entirely. You end up confused, doubting your own read of what just happened. That confusion, that fog between the kindness you saw and the sting you felt, is sometimes exactly the point. Next time you feel that heat rising, try this. Notice what they joked about, not whether it landed as funny, whether it was specific to you. That specificity is data. It tells you where the envy is actually aimed. Distancing after your success, you get the promotion, you text the group chat. Suddenly that friend who texted you every other day goes quiet for weeks. When they do respond, it's short. One word, no follow-up. Not angry, just absent. That shift, that specific timing says something. What you are watching is someone recalibrating their relationship to you. When you were peers, the friendship felt safe, equal. But the moment you stepped ahead, got the thing they wanted or wanted to want, you became a mirror for their own stuck place. Being around you now feels like looking at the gap. So they close the door a little. The tricky part is that this person may genuinely like you and genuinely feel envious at the same time. These are not opposites in the human heart. They can sit right next to each other, which is why the distancing often feels subtle and confusing. It is not a dramatic fight or a clear betrayal. It is a slow fade, a change in rhythm. Watch for the difference between someone who celebrates you and then processes their own feelings separately versus someone who celebrates you and then vanishes. The first person might need space, but comes back. The second one is protecting themselves from something harder to name. That distance is not punishment. It is self-preservation. If someone you trusted suddenly makes themselves scarce after your win, do not fill the silence by chasing them or by shrinking your own joy. That teaches them and you the wrong lesson. Let the distance exist. Some people need time. Others are choosing to stay further away. Both are information. Fake happiness for you. You tell a friend about something good that happened, a job offer, a new relationship, a small win. Watch what happens in the first 2 seconds. Real joy lights up fast and feels warm. Envy's first move is to swallow that warmth and paint it over with a smile. The smile comes a beat late, and it sits a little too wide, a little too long. When someone envies you, celebrating your good news becomes a performance they have to nail. The words, "That's amazing," "I'm so happy for you," come out correct, but the energy underneath feels hollow, like they're reading lines at a play. Their voice might even get higher or more careful, overcompensating to prove they mean it. You might not catch it consciously, but your body knows the difference between real delight and acted out kindness. Here's what actually happens inside them. Joy for you and hurt for themselves fight in real time. So the smile is real, but it's not about you. It's the effort of holding both feelings at once without letting the envy show. They genuinely want to feel happy for you. They just can't, not yet. The pattern that matters is repetition. If you notice this across multiple moments, not just a single bad day, that's your signal. Repeat performances of enthusiasm that land a little flat, that cost them visible effort to deliver, suggests someone is working hard to hide something underneath. It doesn't make them a villain. It means their own pain is louder than their joy for you right now, and noticing that quietly might change how you hold the friendship going forward. Bringing up your past struggles. You mentioned you used to be broke, and suddenly they're reminding you of it every time you spend money. You talk about how insecure you felt in your 20s, and weeks later they reference it with a smile that doesn't quite land. The pattern is subtle. They're not attacking, they're just remembering. Hard. What's actually happening is they're trying to shrink the distance between where you were and where you are now. Your growth makes them uncomfortable, so they keep yanking you back to the version of you that was smaller, needier, less sure. It's a way of saying you're not really different, you just got lucky. Your struggles weren't character building, they're proof you don't deserve what you have. The trickiest part is how they couch it. They might frame it as concern. Remember how hard that was for you? Or nostalgia, like they're bonding over shared history. But notice the timing. Do they bring it up when you're winning or when you're confident? Do they mention it to other people when you're around? That's the tell. What's worth knowing is this: someone genuinely proud of you doesn't need to keep you tethered to old pain. They let you walk forward. Jealous people are quietly desperate to prove that your present success is fragile, that you're one mistake away from needing them again, or worse, from proving that you were never actually worthy. When you catch it happening, you don't have to explain or defend. Just notice, remember it, and let them keep the old story. You're writing a new one. The measuring gaze. You walk into a room and someone's eyes flick from your shoes to your face to your ring, then back down. Not a glance, a scan, like they're taking inventory at a store they don't own. That moment of optical appraisal, that's the measuring gaze, and it almost always means someone is running a quiet comparison happening right in front of you. Here's what makes it stick. The gaze lingers just a fraction too long on whatever you have that they don't. Maybe it's success, a partner, a body, a skill they've been hunting for. Their eyes don't stay on your face the way friends do. Instead, they dock on the thing, the achievement, the appearance, the proof, and you feel weighed. Often they'll smile while doing it, which is the double bind that makes it real. The person giving the measuring gaze is usually someone close enough to matter. A colleague who saw your promotion, a friend when you mention a date, someone who cares what you have because they're still chasing their own version. The friendly voice and the scanning eyes contradict each other, and your nervous system catches it before your brain does. What this tells you is simple. Envy has a physical signature, and it looks nothing like admiration. Admiration lingers on your face and in your eyes. Envy lingers on the thing itself, the object, the achievement, the proof. Your body knows the difference. Next time someone does this to you, don't second guess what you saw. The measurement is real, the friendliness is real, and both can live in the same moment, interrupting your good moments. You just landed something good, a promotion, a genuine compliment, a small win you're still warm about. You turn to share it, and someone close to you suddenly needs something. Not after. Now. Their phone buzzes. Their problem surfaces. Their voice gets louder. The moment collapses like a tent in wind. Envy often wears the mask of urgency. When someone consistently punctures your joy, not once, but as a pattern, they may be steering without realizing it. The interruption feels small, it feels accidental, but small patterns are the ones we don't question, which is precisely why they work so well. Nobody notices a pinprick until you look down and see blood. Pay careful attention to the timing more than the excuse itself. Does this person's crisis always seem to peak when you're peaking? Do they ask about themselves the moment you mention something good about you? Do they change the subject before you've finished glowing? That's not coincidence. That's someone who can't bear the space your happiness takes up in the room. The quietest form of resentment is the refusal to let someone else have their moment alone. It's not shouting you down, it's just making sure you don't get to land it fully. They get to stay in the room, but they won't let you stay in the light. Next time you notice it happening, try a small experiment. Finish your thought anyway. Don't deflect to their problem. Don't shrink. Watch what happens when you don't make space for the interruption. That reaction, annoyance, coldness, or sudden distance, will tell you more than any words ever could. Copying your style secretly. You change your haircut. 3 weeks later, your friend texts you a photo of themselves with the same length and color, but frames it as their own idea. Or you mention a hobby, a phrase, a way of dressing, and months pass before you notice them doing the exact same thing, always with a small delay, always positioned as pure coincidence. It feels weird when you spot the pattern, but you also can't quite call it theft. What makes this particular flavor of envy so quietly corrosive is the choreography of it. They're not announcing, "I want to be you." They're practicing being you in private, then rolling it out as their own discovery. The delay is strategic, built-in deniability wrapped in a gift bow. If you call it out, they can shrug and say, "Great minds think alike," or "It's just a trend everyone's wearing." Plausible, safe, unchallenged. The copying happens because admiration and resentment are living in the same room, sharing the same nervous energy. They like something about you, your confidence, your taste, your ability to pull something off without apologizing. But they also resent that you have it and they don't. So they borrow it. They try it on. They hope it fits them the same way, and if it doesn't, at least nobody needs to know they borrowed the blueprint. Watch for the pattern more than the single instance. One copied thing is coincidence. 2 might still be. But when someone's fingerprints are all over your choices, your aesthetic, your mannerisms, always trailing behind, always repackaged and rebranded, that's worth noticing. You're looking at someone still searching for themselves through your reflection. You don't need to confront them. Just stop mistaking their Me Too moments for genuine connection, denying you inspired them. You mentioned something you've been working on, a project, a skill, a way of thinking, and a week later you notice them doing almost the same thing. But when you gently point it out, they pull back hard. "No, I came up with this independently," they say, or worse, "I was already heading in that direction." The energy shifts. You feel small for even noticing. What matters here is the speed of the denial, not whether they copied you exactly. Someone who genuinely wasn't inspired by you usually says, "Oh, cool, we had the same idea," and moves on. They don't defend themselves. But envy makes people defensive because admitting you influenced them feels like admitting you matter, that you led and they followed, and that stings. The denial also protects a story they tell themselves, that they're original, that they arrived at things on their own merit, that you're not ahead of them. If you inspired them, that narrative cracks, so they'll rewrite the timeline, downplay the timing, or claim they were already thinking it. Anything but the simple truth that you showed them something worth doing. Watch for the pattern over time, not a single incident. If someone consistently denies your influence while quietly adopting your moves, that's envy at work, turning admiration into a debt they refuse to acknowledge. They're protecting their image from themselves first and from you second. Sometimes it doesn't feel malicious at all, which is what makes it tricky. But the pattern is real. Stay aware of who you're giving energy to, because some people will take it and make it invisible. The cold shoulder timing. You just told them your good news, the promotion, the trip, the engagement, and for exactly 2 seconds, their face brightened. Then came the micro pause. Not awkward exactly, just a half beat too long before they said, "That's great," in a voice that had somehow gotten quieter. What you witnessed was the moment their envy had to choose, show up or hide. The cold shoulder in envy follows a pattern you can learn to spot. Someone shifts distance after you've mentioned something they want themselves. They're suddenly busy when you reach out, but mysteriously available when the mutual friends call. They comment less on your posts now, or comment in a way that lands flat, generic, slightly late. It's not that they've decided to dislike you. It's that your good fortune became a mirror they couldn't bear looking into. So they turned away. The cruelest part is the timing. Their withdrawal happens right after your win, not before. This matters because it proves something. They were fine with you until your life moved ahead of theirs. The warmth was always conditional on a particular distance between you. Cross it, and the friendship develops a temperature drop nobody quite admits to. They shrink back slowly, not all at once. What makes this worth knowing is that it tells you something true about them, not about you. Their envy is their interior work, their own reckoning with what they haven't yet built or become. But your job is simpler. Notice when someone's presence changes in proportion to your happiness. Not every friendship can hold the weight of your good life. And that's information worth keeping close. Gossiping about your wins. You just landed the promotion. Your friend heard it from someone else and came back to you with a twisted version, one where you got lucky, or where the boss felt sorry for you, or where someone else deserved it more. Notice what happened there. They didn't congratulate you fresh. They told a story about your win to a third person first, and that story had teeth in it. This is different from normal conversation. Real friends ask questions directly. They feel curious about what happens next. But when envy runs underneath, gossip becomes the release valve. They're processing their own sting by sharing a version of your success that feels smaller, less fair, less real than what actually happened. The real tell is the delay and the audience. They don't tell you, they tell others. They're not celebrating, they're narrating. And the narrative always has a small hook, a detail that makes you look less than, or lucky, or undeserving. It's a way of taking the shine off without looking mean to your face. Pay attention the next time someone congratulates you, then disappears to gossip about it. That gap between what they said to your face and what they're saying elsewhere is where the real feeling lives. When someone envies you quietly, they need to make your good thing less good in the story they tell. It balances the jealousy, makes them feel less small. You don't need to confront them. Just notice who gets the real story first, you or someone else. The strategic absence. You're celebrating something small, a new job, a good review, a piece of progress you're genuinely proud of. You tell a friend who's always been around. Then they vanish. Not forever, just for 3 days, a week. Long enough that by the time they resurface, the moment feels ancient, and mentioning it again would be weird. That silence is not random. What makes this different from regular flakiness is the timing. They show up when you're struggling, checking in, offering advice, being the solid one. The second something good lands, They suddenly have plans. Their phone dies. They get busy with a project you never hear about again. The pattern repeats like clockwork. People who feel envious often can't stomach witnessing you be happy about what they wanted or don't have. So they do something clever. They create distance just long enough to miss the bloom of it. They don't want to watch you shine, but they also can't afford to look cruel by disappearing outright. The strategic absence is the middle ground. Notice whether this person shows up for your actual struggles, then ghosts when the news is good. If that rhythm repeats, present for the fall, absent for the rise, you're not dealing with someone who's just overwhelmed. Their comfort in the friendship depends on you being slightly smaller than they feel. Save the real wins for people who stay in the room when the light comes on, undermining you in groups. You are mid-story at a table, something small you did well, and someone laughs a little too quickly, not with you, but at the gap in the story. But wait, didn't you say last week you'd never done that before? Or they reframe your win as luck, as accident, as less impressive than you meant it. Alone, they are fine. Around others, they shrink you. This is not accident. Envy does not sabotage in private. There is no audience there, no correcting of the record needed. The group setting is the whole point. They are not just doubting you. They are making sure others doubt you too. It is quiet vandalism, a question planted, a joke that lands small. You will recognize this because it happens when the stakes are low and the witnesses are many. You mention a job offer. They immediately ask about the salary as a way to suggest it might not be impressive. You talk about a new relationship. They bring up a detail that makes it sound premature. They are not disagreeing with you. They are dismantling the version of you that other people are watching. The trap is that you will second-guess yourself, replay the moment, wonder if you did oversell it. That doubt is exactly what they want you to carry. Your job is simpler. Notice the pattern. Does this person only poke holes when an audience is there? Do they reframe your good news as smaller once it is public? If yes, you are watching envy work in real time, and you do not have to absorb their anxiety as truth, questioning how you did it. You just got promoted, and someone you know casually pulls you aside. They smile, seem genuinely interested, then ask the same question 3 different ways. What exactly did you say in the interview? Did your boss know someone? Was it just timing, or did you do something specific? The tone feels light, but underneath is something searching, almost investigative. There is a difference between curiosity and interrogation. A real friend who is happy for you might ask how you did it once, and then move on to how you feel about it. An envious person asks repeatedly, fishing for a gap in your story, proof that you got lucky, had help, or didn't really earn it. They are building a case against your success without saying so. What they are really hunting for is a loophole, an unfair advantage, the invisible hand that made it happen. If they can prove your win was hollow, it stops mattering. It stops hurting. They cannot ask directly, so they dissect instead, testing whether they could replicate it by finding the cracks. You do not owe anyone a detailed blueprint of your moves. You can be vague. You can say, a lot of things came together, and leave it there, not because you are hiding something, but because relentless questioning is not curiosity. It is a small, quiet challenge to what you have earned. The best response is often a smile and a redirect. I was just ready, I think. How are things with you? You are not shutting them down. You are refusing the audit. The suspicious flattery. A colleague corners you after a meeting and says, your presentation was incredible. way better than I could ever do. 3 weeks earlier, they barely acknowledged a win. Now suddenly, you're flawless. Your gut tightens. Something feels off, and you're right to trust that feeling. Envy doesn't announce itself. It borrows the language of admiration. When someone genuinely admires you, their compliments arrive naturally, mixed with the normal texture of conversation. Envious flattery has a different weight to it. It's effortful, stacked high, often layered underneath with self-deprecation, a quiet way of keeping score while telling you how great you are. They're measuring the gap between you and them in real time. Watch for the timing. Does the praise spike right after you succeed, especially at something they wanted? Does it arrive wrapped in a question that feels more like interrogation than celebration? How did you even manage that? Or, I could never do what you did. That's the signal. Real admiration doesn't need to puzzle out your advantage or remind itself of the distance. Here's what matters. Your instinct that something feels sticky is data, not paranoia. You don't owe anyone the work of believing their flattery is pure. Someone can find you remarkable and still resent that you have what they don't. Both emotions live in the same chest. Recognizing the suspicious flattery lets you hold their words at the right distance, grateful for the praise without letting it blind you to what's actually moving underneath it. Redirecting attention to themselves. You just told someone about a win, a promotion, a relationship moment, anything that matters. Their face shifts. Then they start talking, not about your thing, about themselves, a project they're working on, a problem they're wrestling with, a story where they're the one handling something difficult. The conversation pivots so smoothly, you almost don't notice it happened. What makes it tricky is that this doesn't always feel hostile. They might even frame it as relating. Oh, that reminds me of when It can sound natural, like conversation riffing. But underneath, there's a pattern. When you have the spotlight, it doesn't stay on you for long. Something in them can't quite sit with your moment being the main thing. Envy does this sometimes. Not the screaming kind, the kind that whispers. If someone secretly wishes they had what you have, being forced to listen to you enjoy it creates a low-level itch. Redirecting attention is one way the nervous system protects itself, a quiet grab for the spotlight back, or a way to rebalance by reminding everyone, including themselves, of their own accomplishments or struggles. The real tell is consistency. Does this happen once or every single time you share something good? Do they do it to others or mostly to you? If you notice the pattern, don't call it out or get angry. Just cluck it. People who envy you will keep trying to shrink your wins or pull the focus back to themselves. Next time you share something, watch where their eyes go and what comes out of their mouth. You'll know. Feigning ignorance of your work. You mention a project you've spent 3 months on, and someone close to you goes blank. Oh, I didn't know you were doing that. You could swear you told them. Casually at dinner, they nodded. Yet now they're asking basic questions like, you never spoke at all. The kind that suggests they know nothing about what matters to you. That selective forgetting is worth noticing. Someone genuinely invested in your life holds onto details. They remember the client's name, the deadline you stressed over, ask follow-ups without prompting. Strategic ignorance works differently. It's a way of keeping you smaller, of denying the significance of what you've built. If they don't acknowledge the work, they don't have to acknowledge your progress. The envier does this to avoid the sting of comparison. If your success doesn't quite register, the gap between you stays invisible. It's a small act of erasure happening in real time. The vague smile, the flat, "oh, nice," the refusal to ask the question that would make your accomplishment solid between you. The trap is that you'll second-guess yourself. Maybe you really didn't tell them. Maybe you're unrealistic about what they should remember. But there's a difference between forgetfulness and pattern. If this person recalls every detail about others' lives but draws a blank on yours, that's not accident. That's choice. Watch how selective their ignorance is. It will show you what they're protecting themselves from. The subtle exclusion. You just found out your coworker went to lunch with the team, everyone except you. They didn't mention it beforehand. When you ask why you weren't invited, the answer comes smooth and easy. "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to come." No malice in the voice, just a small, certain assumption about what you'd prefer. Here's what that really is: a boundary drawn without your permission. An envious person doesn't always attack or criticize. Sometimes they just quietly exclude you from the ordinary rituals. The group chat that doesn't include you, the invite that gets sent to everyone but somehow skips your inbox, the knowing laugh at an inside joke you weren't there to hear. What makes this dangerous is that it feels like nothing. It's not confrontation. It's not even obviously rude, because they can always claim you wouldn't have wanted in anyway. But that's exactly the point. Envy that whispers is harder to name than envy that shouts, and it lets someone create distance while keeping their hands clean. The pattern, though, is what tells the story. Notice if someone consistently forgets to loop you in, leaves you out of casual plans, or assumes your preferences without asking. That's not thoughtfulness. That's soft punishment delivered with a smile. They're managing the relationship by making sure you don't get too close to the circle they want you kept away from. If it happens once, let it go. If it's the shape of how they treat you, the recurring rhythm, you've got your answer. They like having you around less than they like having you at a distance, highlighting your privileges. You mention your flight home for the holidays, and suddenly they're asking which airline, how much it cost, whether your family paid. It's not curiosity, it's a small blade being drawn. They're pointing at the thing you have that they don't, hoping you'll feel the full weight of that gap. Envy loves wearing the mask of interest. Someone envious will find clever ways to make your advantages visible, even pointed. Your new job? They ask about the salary range everyone says those roles pay. Your partner's family? They wonder aloud about what their house must be worth. Your vacation plans? They want to know the exact cost. None of these questions arrive by accident. They're carefully drawing the distance between what you have and what they lack, making sure you see it too. The real tell is timing and tone. A genuinely curious friend asks because they want to understand your life better. An envious person asks to mark the gap, to make sure you register the privilege they've spotted. Pay attention to whether the conversation circles back to curiosity about you, or whether it pivots inward to them, to their shortage, to the comparison itself. If someone keeps circling back this way, you don't owe them a defense of your advantages or an apology for what you've built or inherited. But try something gentler. Share less detail about the material stuff, and ask them real questions about their world that aren't invitations to keep comparing. People who envy you need to feel they matter for reasons beyond what they own or earn. That recognition, given freely, sometimes puts the blade down. The must be nice remark. You mention you just booked a week in Portugal. Your friend smiles and says, "Must be nice." They seem fine. But something in that three-word phrase is doing heavy lifting, and you feel it, even if you can't quite name it. That tone isn't really about the trip. It's about a gap they've decided exists between you and them. Here's what makes it so slippery. The remark isn't loud enough to argue with, and it's not hostile. It's almost friendly on the surface, which is exactly why it stings. What they're really saying is, I notice you have something I don't, and I'm marking that fact for both of us. The must be nice person isn't celebrating your luck. They're quietly cataloging the difference. If it happened once, you'd forget, but someone who envies you will say it repeatedly in smaller moments too. Nice shoes. Must be nice to have free time. Must be nice to have parents who help. Each one is a tiny stamp, a way of saying without saying, your life contains things mine doesn't. With each stamp, they're also saying, I see that, and it bothers me. What makes it a tell is the passivity baked into the phrasing itself. A genuinely happy person would say, that sounds amazing, or I'm so jealous, an active emotion. Must be nice is something you just acknowledge and move past. It's envy that learned to stay polite, which usually means it's had plenty of time to simmer. The remark isn't a moment of weakness. It's become a habit, a reflex they don't even notice anymore. Emotional withdrawal after praise. You say something genuine. That presentation was really impressive. And for a split second, you see them light up. Then it's gone. They go quiet, polite, thin-lipped. A few minutes later, they've slipped into small talk or suddenly need to check their phone. The warmth just collapses, like a building you watched go up moments before. What you are watching is the collision between two feelings crashing into each other at once. Part of them wanted the praise, truly did, but another part, the part that measures, compares, and keeps score, just got reminded that you got something they didn't. They can't sit with both feelings without feeling like a fraud or a failure, so they withdraw. It's not intentional cruelty. It's the reflex of someone who hates that you won. The withdrawal does double duty. It puts distance between themselves and the sting of comparison, and it signals, whether they know it or not, that your praise doesn't matter, that they're above needing it. If they seem unbothered, they can pretend the envy isn't there. The cold shoulder becomes armor. Real contentment for others looks completely different. It stays warm. They ask follow-up questions. They want to know what made it work. But when someone goes cold right after you lift them up, they're not rejecting the compliment. They're running from what it reminded them they lack. Next time you notice that sudden chill, you've just caught the moment envy breaks through their mask. The timing is never random. It arrives exactly when you've hit a nerve. Keeping score silently. You post about a small win, a promotion, a vacation photo, a new relationship. A friend likes it within seconds, leaves a warm comment. But then you notice something. They never told you their own good news first. They wait until after you share, and suddenly their equivalent story surfaces in conversation. It is not malice, exactly. It is keeping score in invisible ink. The envious person cannot help but track the ledger. You got praised at work, so they need to mention their raise. Your partner surprised you with flowers, so they need to talk about the trip their person planned, not to celebrate alongside you, to establish that they have equivalence, maybe superiority. The scorecard is always running, even when they smile. What makes this particularly sharp is how it hides inside normal friendship. They are not hostile. They are not distant. But there is a small delay, a strategic insertion, a need to balance the scale. They are managing a hidden anxiety, that you are pulling ahead, that the gap is widening, that your life is becoming the story everyone wants to hear instead of theirs. Watch for the pattern, not the single moment. Does this person reliably respond to your news with their own? Do they seem to need to match or exceed what you have shared? That constant recalibration is exhausting for them, even if you never notice it happening. The real tell is what happens when you have nothing good to share. Do they suddenly relax, become warmer, easier? That shift is the answer you are looking for, the disappearing enthusiasm. You tell someone about a win, maybe a promotion, a new relationship, a trip you're taking. Their face does this thing. The smile appears, sure, but their words evaporate. A half second of real warmth. Then they shift. The energy drains. They say, "That's cool," in a voice that sounds like they're reading from a script written in 2003, and you feel it. The absence isn't invisible. Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Envy doesn't broadcast itself as a sneer or a jealous comment, at least not in people who care about their reputation or their relationship with you. Instead, it leaks out as withdrawal. When you trigger something they want but don't have, their nervous system actually dampens their own enthusiasm. They can't sustain the fake brightness. It exhausts them too much. Watch for the specific pattern. They're animated when the topic circles back to them or lands on neutral ground. But the moment your story becomes about your gain, something switches off inside. The questions dry up. The natural follow-ups stop. They move to the next thing faster than feels organic. They're not angry or mean. They're just conserving energy on something that hurts to sit with and celebrate. The easy mistake is reading this silence as indifference. It's not. True indifference is flat and empty, a shrug without feeling. This is active suppression. A person fighting their own reaction in real time, catching themselves and pulling back. That distinction matters more than you might think because it tells you something true about the dynamic between you two. You've touched a nerve that actually matters to them, over explaining their own success. You mention a win, maybe a promotion, a piece of work you shipped, something that just landed right, and then they launch into it. A 10-minute breakdown of how they achieved their win, the obstacles they crushed, the strategy nobody understood at the time but proved them right. The thing is, you didn't ask. What's happening underneath is evidence building. When someone envies you, they feel a sting, a ranking shift where you're suddenly ahead. So they narrate their own win in exquisite detail, as if specificity itself will restore the balance. The over-explanation is a quiet bid for reassignment back to equal. You notice it because the story doesn't fit the moment. There's no natural entry for it. You said something and they took the wheel. Most people secure about their success mention it once, maybe take a question. But someone carrying envy, they'll keep going, adding details, reframing, layering it until their achievement feels airtight. This behavior often reads as bragging, but it's closer to defending. They're not trying to impress you. They're trying to convince themselves the comparison isn't tilting the way they fear. Try this. When they're mid-explanation, ask a gentle question about your situation instead. Watch whether they pivot back to themselves or listen. The answer tells you everything. Testing your reactions. Someone envious of you will do something I call the quiet probe. They'll say something cutting wrapped in a joke, nothing you can quite call them out on, and then watch your face. Are you hurt? Annoyed? Do you defend yourself? They're running an experiment, and your reaction is the data they crave. Think of the friend who asks where you got your promotion, then immediately adds, "Must be nice to get lucky breaks like that." Or the one who notices your new relationship and says, I give it 6 months, with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. They're not really joking. They're testing whether you'll crumble, get defensive, or stay unbothered, because how you respond tells them something crucial about whether your confidence is genuine or still fragile underneath. This matters to the envious person because fragility is contagious. If they can make you doubt yourself, your wins start feeling less real. If you bite back hard, it confirms you're threatened by them. If you stay steady and kind, that's almost worse. It proves you're actually secure, and that widens the gap between you even more. The trap is letting them know they got under your skin. The moment you do, you've handed them the exact script they'll repeat next time. When someone probes like this, try something smaller. Acknowledge what they said without performing defensiveness or fake cheerfulness. A simple, "That's one way to look at it," or a quiet laugh, then move on. You've told them nothing, revealed nothing, and that calm silence becomes the answer they didn't want to hear. The reluctant introduction. You're at a dinner with someone close to you, a colleague, an old friend, a sibling. Someone impressive walks in, talented, well-connected, the kind of person your envious friend could actually benefit from knowing. You wait to see what happens. Your friend goes quiet. They don't offer to introduce you. They don't light up at the chance to make the connection. They just let the moment dissolve. This isn't shyness or poor social skills. A secure person, someone genuinely rooting for you, will often push you toward opportunity, even when it costs them a little social energy. They'll say, "You two should talk. You'd click." They'll be your hype person. But envy does something strange. It makes people hoard access. If they can't have what you have, they don't want you closer to it either. The reluctant introduction reveals something raw about where you sit in their mental map. It shows you that part of them sees you as already ahead, and they're not quite ready to help you climb higher. They'd rather keep you in their current circle where the comparison stays familiar and manageable. Watch for this one closely because it lives in the space between words, in what they don't do. The friend who never connects you, the colleague who stays quiet when someone asks if they know anyone in your field. That silence is a small door closing, and it tells you everything you need to know about whether they're actually invested in your rise or just invested in keeping you exactly as you are, diminishing your relationships. You mentioned that your partner surprised you with dinner last night. Nothing fancy, just thoughtful. An envious friend's eyes flick sideways, and they say something like, "Oh, that's nice," with a tone that somehow makes it sound small. Then they pivot. But you know how people are. They always let you down eventually. What just happened? They didn't attack your relationship. They buried it under a layer of false wisdom. This is the soft knife of the envious. They minimize what you have by hinting it's fragile, temporary, or not what it seems. It sounds like they're protecting you. It reads like concern for the road ahead. But the real move is to make your good things feel hollow. So you stop feeling lucky and start feeling suspicious of the people closest to you instead. They want your joy to curdle from the inside out. Pay attention to how they talk about your people. Do they ask genuine follow-up questions, or do they offer preemptive warnings? I'm sure they mean well, but do they point out flaws in people you love that you'd never asked them to evaluate? Do they seem almost relieved when you mention conflict, like they've been waiting to be proven right about something dark lurking beneath the surface? The trap is that this works best when it's subtle enough that you can't quite call them out without sounding paranoid or defensive, But if someone consistently shrinks your relationships instead of celebrating them, try a different question. Are they protecting me or protecting themselves from the sight of my happiness? That answer tells you everything about where they actually stand. Watching your reactions closely. You tell someone good news, a win at work, a trip you booked, a compliment you got, and you notice their eyes lock onto your face for just a beat too long. Not in the warm way, more like they're reading you, studying what joy looks like on someone else. That hypervigilance is a tell. Envious people do this because they're running a constant comparison engine in their heads. When you light up about something, they're not just hearing the words, they're measuring the distance between your happiness and theirs. They're watching to see if you're really that happy or if you're hiding struggle too. They're looking for cracks in the story you're telling. Here's what makes it subtle. They might ask follow-up questions that sound supportive but feel investigative. Oh, wow. How much did that cost? Are you worried about? How long did it take you to get there? They're not asking because they care about the details. They're asking because they need to understand the full shape of your advantage so they can measure it against their own life. The trap is that you might mistake this intense attention for genuine interest. It can feel like they're invested in you, when really they're invested in understanding why you got something they didn't. Next time someone leans in a little too hard after your news, notice not just what they ask, but whether the questions ever circle back to you or whether they're just collecting data. That watching is exhausting for them, even if you don't feel it. And that exhaustion is often what breaks the mask eventually. The false modesty contest. You mention a promotion, a win, a piece of good news, and they nod, then immediately counter with their own story, wrapped in apology and softness. Oh, that's cool. But honestly, mine wasn't even that hard. They're not celebrating with you. They're competing in a game where the real prize is seeming least impressed by their own success. Watch closely next time you share something you're proud of. The envious person will listen, then pivot to something they did, usually framed as less impressive, but timed to land right before you finish. It's like they can't let your moment exist without inserting themselves into the frame. The false modesty is just the cover. The real move is the one-upmanship underneath. This happens because envy does strange arithmetic in someone's brain. If you're up, they must be down. So they have to lift themselves in real time, even dressed in self-deprecation. I'm not trying to brag, but is the opening bell. What follows is always a brag. The modesty is camouflage. The actual tell is whether they do this with everyone or only with you. Truly modest people stay quiet when you celebrate. Envious people can't help themselves. They have to prove they're in your league, even while apologizing for being in the league at all. If someone keeps entering contests you never started, you've got your answer. Let them have their counter move anyway. People who envy you often don't know they're doing it. What matters is that you see the pattern now, and you can read envy for what it really is, a small, constant scramble to matter as much as you do, ignoring your milestones. You get the job. You tell them that day. They say, "That's nice," and pivot to their own week without pause. Or you announce the engagement, and their response comes 3 texts later, buried between complaints. The pattern is so small it almost feels paranoid to notice it, but your nervous system knows. When someone chronically refuses to really land on your wins, something's running underneath. Envy often wears the mask of indifference because it hurts too much to genuinely celebrate you. So instead, they flatten it. No follow-up questions. No, tell me more. Just the bare minimum politeness, and then the spotlight swings away. The person who truly wishes you well naturally leans into your joy. They ask details, they ride your momentum. Envy does the opposite. It pulls oxygen out of the room. This shows up hardest when the milestone is something they wanted for themselves. A promotion in their field, a partner, a move they'd planned. Your good news becomes an inconvenient mirror of their lack, so they ice it over with a thin smile and short sentence. It's not cruelty exactly, it's self-protection, but you feel the cold regardless. You can't force someone to be genuinely happy for you, and trying makes you look desperate. What you can do instead is watch for the pattern and decide what kind of access that person gets to your wins. Not punishment, just clarity. Save your real celebrations for people whose eyes actually light up. That's how you tell who's in your corner and who's keeping a ledger. The territorial behavior. Watch what happens when you mention a win to someone who secretly envies you. Their energy doesn't sink, it gets sharper. They might physically shift away or suddenly need to talk about someone else's accomplishment in the same breath. What you are seeing is envy doing what envy does. It marks territory, stakes a claim on the space you just claimed for yourself. Territorial behavior shows up in small, easy-to-miss ways. They start correcting you more often. They insert themselves into your conversations or projects without invitation. Not to help, but to be in the frame. They mention how they almost did what you did, or how they know someone who did it better. None of this feels aggressive. It feels like they are just present. But presence, when it comes from envy, has teeth. It is a quiet assertion. I was here first. I belong here too. The real tell is proximity without warmth. An envious person will want to be near you, near your wins, near your circle, but the closeness never feels relaxed. There is a checking quality to it. They are monitoring, comparing, keeping score. You might leave the conversation feeling oddly drained, as if something was measured and you were found slightly lacking. That drain is the marker. Territorial behavior often masquerades as friendship. They show up, they pay attention, but the attention has an edge, like they are watching the gap between you and hoping it narrows. If someone in your life suddenly gets tighter around you after good news, that is not coincidence. That is territory being staked. Notice it and keep what matters close. Suddenly too busy for you. A friend who always had time for your calls suddenly doesn't pick up for 3 weeks. Then you spot them at a coffee shop, phone down, laughing with someone else. When you text later, the response is brief, apologetic, buried under a wall of excuses about work and life and everything piling up. The shift was fast, almost clinical. No fight, no conversation, just distance spreading like a slow leak. What happened is often quieter than betrayal. Envy doesn't announce itself. Instead, it calculates. They watched you land something they wanted, a promotion, a relationship, a skill people respect. Now being around you feels like standing in front of a mirror that shows them what they don't have. So they compress your place in their calendar. Not because they're busy, because seeing you costs them something. Pay attention to the pattern, not the excuse. A genuinely busy person finds pockets. A 5-minute call, a quick text between meetings. Someone pulling away out of envy makes sure you know they're too important now to have time for you. There's a quiet message in the withdrawal. You were disposable. Or maybe they're saying something darker to themselves. You made me feel small. The hard part is that it stings. You did nothing wrong. You succeeded. And that success became a reason to lose someone. If this is happening, resist the urge to prove you're still worth their time. That game just feeds the resentment. Instead, let the distance teach you something real. People who genuinely love your wins don't need to disappear when you have them. Nitpicking your appearance. You walk into a room looking like yourself, hair done, outfit decent, and a friend smiles and says, "Oh, new glasses? They're different." Or notices the one day you're bloated, or mentions that your skin looks tired today, or asks when you started dressing more casual. Nothing mean, nothing you can point to and say, "There, that's cruel," but you feel it anyway. A small blade wrapped in cotton. What's happening is simpler and darker than meanness. Envy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. A person who wishes they had what you have will find ways to lower the thing you're proud of, not to destroy it, but to shrink the distance between you. If your appearance is something people notice, something you carry with confidence, that becomes a target, not because you did anything wrong, but because it's shining. The pattern gets sticky because nitpicking feels like friendship. Your friend is noticing you, engaging with you, being honest. But honest and envious are not the same thing. An envious friend will comment on your worst angle the day you're feeling best. They'll point out what's changing, especially if what's changing is you getting better, richer, happier, more attractive. Here's the tell. Do they also celebrate your appearance? Do they ever say you look great without the butt attached? People who genuinely like you lift you. People who are quietly competing keep one hand on your shoulder and one finger ready to poke. Pay attention to the ratio. If it's all poke, you already know the answer. The passive-aggressive text. You just landed something good, a job offer, a date that went well, a quiet win. Then the text arrives. "Wow, that's nice." Or, "Must be cool to have that kind of luck." The period sits heavier than it should. You read it 3 times. Nothing explicit is wrong, yet something tastes off. That's envy dressed as friendliness. The envious person cannot say, "I wish that was me," so they say something technically kind while salting it. They're not attacking you. They're inoculating themselves against feeling small. The passive-aggressive text lets them stay in the friendship while keeping distance from your joy. What makes it so slippery is the ambiguity. You could be reading paranoia into a tired text, but if you notice a pattern, certain accomplishments always get this treatment, always a slight dig hidden in parentheses or an emoji that reads like a smirk, you're probably not imagining it. Envy often speaks in understatement. The tell is what they don't say. A genuinely happy friend asks questions, wants details, wants in. The envious texter stops the conversation. They deliver the comment and retreat. No follow-up, no warmth, just the passive hit and the fade. If this is happening to you, don't over-explain your win or apologize for it. That's the trap. A simple, "Thanks, I'm excited," and moving on teaches them that your joy is not negotiable. The friendship either grows warm again or it doesn't. Either way, you'll know. Celebrating others louder. You notice your friend posts about someone else's promotion with 3 exclamation marks and 5 party emojis. When you got yours last month, they sent a thumbs up. It's so small you could miss it. Except you don't, because something in you registered the difference immediately. There's a psychology here worth knowing. People who envy you sometimes overperform their joy for others. It looks like generosity. It sounds like enthusiasm, but it's often a quiet way of managing the distance between where they are and where you are. By celebrating others louder, they create a little buffer, a signal that says, I'm not jealous of you specifically. I celebrate everyone, except they don't, and you can feel that. The pattern shows up everywhere you look. A coworker gets engaged, and suddenly they're the group's biggest cheerleader, crafting paragraphs of excitement. But when something good happens to you, the energy flattens. It's not conscious cruelty. It's more like a flinch, a way of managing uncomfortable feelings by redirecting the spotlight somewhere safer, where comparison doesn't sting quite so much. The sticky part is this: people who genuinely celebrate everyone don't need to adjust their volume. Their warmth stays steady, regardless of whose win is being announced. If you're noticing someone's enthusiasm shifts depending on who the success belongs to, you're not imagining it. It's not your job to fix it, but it's useful data about the relationship's limits. That's worth remembering the next time you're wondering if you should tone yourself down for someone else's comfort. You shouldn't. The concern trolling question. You just shared something good, a promotion, a new relationship, a vacation booked. Then someone close leans in with a soft voice. Aren't you worried about the money though, or how it'll affect your stress? They sound concerned. They sound protective. But something in your chest tightens. You didn't ask for reassurance. You asked for celebration. This is the concern trolling question. The doubt disguised as care. The Envies wraps their resentment in worry so tightly that challenging it makes you look ungrateful, even paranoid. I was just looking out for you. If you're lucky, you feel it. If you're not, you spend the next week second-guessing your own good news. The tell is the timing and texture. Real friends ask hard questions before you leap or after you land safely and need help. The troll asks at the exact moment you're still glowing, when the question lands heaviest. They're not solving anything. They're dimming your light just enough to make it flicker. What makes it stick is the asymmetry. You can't accuse them without sounding defensive or paranoid, which is exactly the bind they wanted you in. The only move is to notice the pattern. Does this person ever celebrate your win straight, or do they always wrap congratulations in a question mark? That answer tells you everything about where the envy lives. Next time you hear that soft, "But aren't you worried?" pause and ask yourself, did I ask for this? Or did they need to ask it? Withdrawing warmth gradually. You know that friend who used to light up when you walked in the room? Then one day you notice they don't anymore. But it happened so slowly you almost missed it. They still text back, still say yes to plans, but the emoji count dropped. The jokes feel thinner. They listen, but their eyes don't crinkle the same way. That's not mood. That's distance being measured out like medicine, 1 degree at a time. Envy does this thing where it cools things down in stages, so nobody can call it out. If someone went cold overnight, you'd notice. You'd ask what happened. But a slow fade feels like life just changing, like natural drift. Except it's not. Underneath, something fractured the moment they saw you land something they wanted. The withdrawal happens so gradually that by the time you feel it, you're already questioning whether it was ever real to begin with. The trap is that you'll second-guess yourself. Did I do something? Are they stressed? And maybe they are. But watch for this pattern. Their warmth returns the instant you're struggling or when you've had a setback. The moment you're winning again, it cools right back down. That's the tell. Envy doesn't hate winners all the time. It just can't bear to celebrate them up close. And the pain of watching you succeed makes distance feel like the only option. Here's what matters. You don't need to confront it or chase the heat back. Instead, notice it clearly and stop pouring energy into proving you're still likable to someone whose feelings shifted beneath the surface. That person is managing their own interior weather. Your job is to spend warmth on people who can hold it without it burning them up inside. The frenemy dynamic. You know the person. They show up for your birthday, send a thoughtful text when you get the job, laugh at your jokes, and yet something in the room feels thin, performative, like they're reading from a script written by someone who doesn't quite know you. That's the frenemy space, the person who genuinely wants to be your friend and genuinely resents you at the same time. The envy doesn't feel like hostility to them. It feels like friendship. They celebrate you publicly, but you notice they always soften your win with a comment. That's amazing, but aren't you worried about? Or, I could never do that. I'm just not built like you, which sounds like a compliment, but lands like a knife. The pattern is subtle enough that you can't quite call it out without sounding paranoid. What's happening is ambivalence dressed up as loyalty. Part of them wants you to thrive because your friendship feels good, status-wise. Part of them needs you to stay slightly smaller so they don't feel eclipsed. Both things are true in them at once, but the pulling down part is where the real energy lives. The trap is that you start second-guessing yourself around them. You share less, you dim, and that's exactly what the envy needed to feel better. Watch for the pattern, not the single moment. One backhanded comment is bad phrasing. 3 in a month is data. When you see it, stop expecting them to hold space for the full version of you. Save that for people who can actually sit with your light without squinting, feeling threatened by your growth. You land a promotion, you start exercising and actually stick with it. You mention a weekend trip you're taking solo, and suddenly that friend goes quiet in a way that feels different. Not happy quiet, but thick, like you just announced something that made the room smaller for them. What you're sensing is the flip side of envy. Someone whose sense of stability depends on you staying roughly where you are. Your growth isn't just good news about you. It's a mirror they didn't ask for, and it reflects back something they're afraid of, that they're not moving or not moving fast enough, or that the gap between you two just widened. If you were struggling together, that was almost comforting. Now you're not, and they feel it. The really telling moment comes later. They might suddenly scrutinize your choices in ways they didn't before. Must be nice, they say about your promotion, but with an edge. They mine for problems in your happiness. Is the new job really that great? Aren't you tired? This isn't curiosity. It's a search for cracks, for proof that your growth isn't real or sustainable. So the threat dissolves, and they can breathe again. If someone feels threatened by your growth, they're not actually celebrating your life. They're protecting theirs. Their comments about you aren't really about you at all. They're about the distance they feel opening up, the comparison they can't stop making. You can't shrink yourself to make them comfortable, and you shouldn't try, but you can notice the pattern and stop wondering if you're imagining their coldness. You're not. You're just reading envy in its loneliest, most defensive form, the dismissive laugh. You just told someone about a win, a new job, a relationship milestone, a thing you worked for, and they laughed. Not a with you laugh, a laugh that cut the air short, like your words were something to deflate. The kind of laugh that lands sideways and makes you suddenly want to shrink the story smaller. Watch what happens next time someone around you shares something real. The Envies doesn't congratulate. They laugh it off, sometimes with a head shake, sometimes with a comment that pretends to be a joke but lands like a blade. Oh, that's cute. Or, well, just wait until. They are not celebrating. They are performing distance from your momentum. The dismissive laugh is a pressure valve. Your win reminds them of something they want but don't have. Instead of sitting with that feeling, instead of actually being happy for you, they diffuse the moment with mockery. It's faster than envy, easier than truth. A laugh that says, "I'm above this," when really it means, "I'm hurt by this." The real signal shows itself in the repetition. They do it every single time you announce something good, not as a random fluke, but like clockwork. And here's the thing, they barely do it to anyone else. It's a reflex tuned specifically to you, a pressure release that only activates when you succeed. People who genuinely like you let your joy be big. People who envy you try to make it smaller. Pay attention to who does the laughing and what they laugh at. That pattern is telling you something worth knowing. Sabotaging quietly behind scenes. A text arrives from someone you thought had your back. They spotted a small flaw in your work before a big presentation. Thoughtful, right? Except they're the only one who caught it, and they waited until 30 minutes before you go live to tell you, not 3 days before when you could breathe. The timing stings in a way you can't quite name. Envy doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through a warning that lands just late enough to hurt. Real sabotage from an envious person moves like surgery. They won't attack you straight on. That torches relationships and makes them look vicious. Instead, they'll helpfully mention your insecurity to someone whose opinion matters. They'll volunteer you for a role designed to expose you. They'll mysteriously forget to pass along a message from someone important. Everything feels accidental. That's the whole design. Call it out, and suddenly you're the paranoid one. The proof lives in patterns, not single moments. A coworker always brings up your deepest worry right before a meeting where you need confidence most. A friend keeps sharing your secrets with exactly the person most likely to judge you. Someone consistently forgets to loop you into opportunities you'd love. One slip is bad luck. 3 in a row is a signature. What makes this vicious is the cover. They can always claim they were protecting you or made an honest mistake. Their envy hides inside concern, but your body knows the difference between someone rooting for you and someone hoping you trip just enough to fall. When the timing feels too clean, when the help only shows up at your weakest moments, when their pattern is readable, that's when you're seeing the real thing clearly. The comparison to themselves. You mention a win, maybe a promotion, a vacation, a new relationship, and their face does something strange. Not anger exactly, more like a quick, quiet collapse, as if they just subtracted you from themselves and found the difference wanting. That moment right there is the tell. Envious people can't hear your news without hearing it as a verdict on their own lives. Their brain is running a live equation before they can stop it. What's happening underneath is almost mechanical. You have this, I don't. You got there, I'm still here, you're becoming that, and I'm becoming this. It happens faster than thought, automatic as breathing, and their smile might still land perfectly, but underneath they've already measured the gap. They're not celebrating you, they're auditing themselves against you, and the math just came back bad. You've become a living scoreboard without asking for the job. The thing they don't realize, most of them anyway, is that this comparison loop runs whether they want it to or not. They're not sitting home plotting your downfall, but every time you land something good, something in them tightens. Your momentum, your choices, your small happiness, all of it gets read as proof they're falling behind. Your win isn't just your win. It's evidence against them. When they follow up with questions about your thing, and they will, pay attention to the difference. Are they curious about you, Or are they trying to reverse engineer where they lost ground? One feels warm and genuine. The other feels like an interrogation wearing a friendly mask. Envious people often can't help themselves. They want the details, the specifics, the recipe, not because they're invested in your story, but because they're trying to understand how you built what they couldn't. Stay alert to who actually celebrates versus who just compares. Discrediting your hard work. You land the promotion. You mention it casually over drinks. And instead of congrats, you get, oh, you just got lucky with timing. Or your boss probably needed to fill the quota. The sting isn't in the words. It's in how they make your effort invisible. They did not say you are undeserving. They said your win was not yours. That move is envy wearing a smile. When someone secretly envies you, they cannot let you own what you built. Because if they admit you earned it through skill, discipline, and timing, then they have to admit they could have done the same, but didn't. That is unbearable to them. So they rewrite the story, luck, connections, privilege, anything but your deliberate choice to show up and push harder than the rest. Listen for the pattern. Does this person do this only with you or with everyone? That distinction matters more than you think, but here is what really cuts. Does their version of your win feel thinner, easier, less you than what actually happened? When someone envies you, they shrink your story down until it fits in a space where they do not have to feel small. The trap is letting their reframe become your doubt. You start explaining yourself. You add proof. You defend effort that was already real, but that is their win. They got you questioning your own clarity. The quietest move is to smile and keep walking. Let them carry the weight of diminishing you. You know what actually happened. That is enough. The next time you build something, watch who reaches for the scissors first. The lukewarm reaction. You land something real, a promotion, a relationship, a piece of work that matters. You tell them, their face does a small thing. They smile. Maybe they say congratulations, but the words arrive flat. No real energy. No follow-up. It's like you just told them about the weather, and you feel it land wrong. What makes this sharp is that it's not hostility. Hostility is easy to spot, easy to dismiss. But lukewarmness? It's plausible deniability wrapped in politeness. They can claim they're tired. You can't prove otherwise. Yet something in you knows. Your good news didn't actually reach them the way it should have. The envier is trapped. Your win lives in a zone they wanted. They can't attack it without looking small. They can't ignore it without losing face. So they compress their reaction into something that looks supportive from the outside, but feels hollow from within. It's the emotional equivalent of a thumbs-up emoji when you needed them to show up. The gap between what they say and what they don't say is where the real story hides. No curiosity, no tell me more, no genuine lift. The silence inside the politeness, that's often where the actual feeling lives. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it again. You don't need to confront it. Just remember, people who truly root for you can't help but lean in. When someone doesn't lean, believe that message too, bringing up who helped you. You just landed something good, a promotion, a connection, a win. And you're telling someone you thought was close to you about it. They smile and nod, but then something shifts. Instead of congratulations, they ask straight away, who helped you get there? Not as an afterthought, as the first real question. That pivot isn't innocent. It's an audit. When someone envies you, They need to make what you earned feel smaller. They can't let it stand as yours alone. That cuts too close. So they hunt for the assist, the person behind the curtain, the luck you rode. The more they can point to outside help, the less your individual effort matters, and the less it stings that they don't have it. Listen for the tone when you answer. You say, "I worked for 3 years on this," and they land with, "Yeah, but Marcus really pushed for you, didn't he?" They're not giving credit. They're redistributing it. Inch by inch, they're moving the victory away from you and toward circumstance, toward other people, toward anything that means you didn't do this yourself. It's quiet. It's thorough. The trap is what happens next in your own head. You start thinking about everyone who did help, and suddenly your own effort feels thinner, less essential. That doubt was the whole point. Real friends celebrate both you and the people who mattered. Envious ones make sure you know it wasn't just you, because if it was, they'd have to face what they're not. The subtle guilt trip. You mention a win, a promotion, a vacation, a thing you're proud of, and suddenly they're asking you soft questions, not mean ones, questions that sound like care. Must be nice to have that kind of time off. When was the last time you just relaxed? Or, I bet your family misses you when you travel so much. The knife is kind. It comes wrapped in concern, dressed up as worry. What's happening is a form of quiet alchemy. They're not attacking your good thing directly. They're reframing it as a cost to someone else. Your joy becomes a debt you're not paying. This works because guilt is sticky. It makes you smaller, more cautious about celebrating next time. You start explaining instead of shining. You hedge. You apologize for the good. The envious person doesn't do this out of conscious malice. Exactly. They do it because your happiness has become proof of their own lack. So they unconsciously tilt the scale. Yes, you got that, but look what it costs. Someone else's loneliness, your own shallow priorities, a burden you didn't even know you were carrying. Pay attention to who does this. Notice when celebration gets met with, "But what about," instead of genuine interest. That pattern tells you something worth knowing. And here's what matters. You don't have to defend your good things to anyone. The guilt trip only works if you accept the premise that your win should come with an apology. It shouldn't. Your joy doesn't require permission or penance. Avoiding celebrating with you. You land the promotion, close the deal, or finally reach the goal you've been chasing. You text them the news, half hoping they'll meet you somewhere to mark it. They respond in 12 minutes with a thumbs up emoji and "Congrats, LOL." Nothing more. No, "Let's grab a drink." No, "When can I see you?" No actual showing up. Just the text minimum version of care. Envy has a specific tell, and it lives right here. When someone genuinely loves you, they want to be in the good moment with you. They want the story, the details, the feeling of being part of your win. But envy operates on shortage mentality. Every win you get feels like a loss for them. So the safer move is to stay away from the celebration entirely. Distance turns the sting into numbness, and they protect themselves that way. Watch for the pattern, not the isolated incident. One congrats text means nothing. But if they consistently dodge the moment, bail on plans after good news, go quiet when you're excited, show up only after the energy has cooled, that pattern is worth noticing. They're not simply busy, they're protecting themselves from what they feel inside. The real signal emerges in how they show up for your other moments. They'll happily sit with you in struggle, complaints, setbacks, doubt. Suddenly they have time and words and presence. But the moment the tide turns in your favor, they contract. Pull back. Go quiet. It's not cruelty exactly. It's just that your happiness triggers a wound they haven't healed yet. Knowing this won't fix them, but it might save you from waiting for a celebration they'll never truly give. The information gatekeeping. You ask someone how they landed that promotion, or scored that client, or cracked the software everyone's struggling with. Their answer comes thin, almost rehearsed. Oh, just luck, I guess. Then they pivot. A week later, you try the question again. The story still hasn't grown. No details, no real recipe, just the same polished vagueness, like they've practiced it. What's happening underneath that smile matters. They know something you don't, and keeping that knowledge locked inside feels like keeping something sacred about themselves. Envious people often treat information like currency. If you get smarter, wealthier, or more connected using what they know, the distance between you shrinks. The gap that makes them feel special collapses. So they ration it, withhold it, or hand you the long version of nothing. The pattern shows itself in what they will talk about: problems, failures, generic advice that won't move you forward, but the actual playbook, the contact, who matters, the resource they found, silence. Sometimes they'll offer worse advice, steering you toward the expensive route, the slow way, the path that keeps you stationary. They want credit for their own win without handing you the instructions. That forgetfulness is not careless. It's deliberate and quiet. Someone who measures their worth against yours will naturally keep the map from your hands. The withholding is the fingerprint of envy. The whisper that your progress is their loss, that your reaching up means they're being left behind. That's why the information stays locked away, no matter how friendly their tone. Minimizing your intelligence. You say something thoughtful in a group and watch what happens next. The envious person smiles a little too quickly and follows up with, "Yeah, but that's not really that hard to figure out." Or, "I mean, anyone could see that." They are not arguing with you. They are shrinking the room you just stood in. It is a slow, surgical move wrapped in friendliness, not attacking your idea, but reframing it as obvious, small, unremarkable. This keeps their own intelligence feeling intact while your contribution gets downgraded from insight to common sense. The math is simple. If what you said was obvious, then you are not impressive, which means they do not have to feel small. What stings is how well they have learned to do this while still seeming warm. The smile, the casual tone, the assumption that anyone with basic reasoning would have landed there. It all feels like agreement, not a demotion. The twist is that they often do this around you specifically. With others, they might celebrate an idea as clever or original. With you, the same idea becomes elementary. You are not imagining it. Envy tends to be selective. It shows up loudest around people who trigger it most. Sometimes the envious person will walk away and later retell the moment to someone else, essentially rewriting the room after they have left it. Either way, it is a sign they feel threatened by how you think, not impressed by it. That matters more than you might expect, because it means the behavior is not really about your idea at all. It is about them managing their own discomfort. The next time you catch it, resist the urge to prove yourself smarter. Instead, notice the gap between how they treat your ideas and how they treat someone else's. That observation is worth keeping. The status, anxiety, leak. Watch what happens the moment someone tells you about their promotion. They're smiling, but then the words shift. How exhausted they are, how they barely sleep, how the new role is actually kind of a headache. There's this strange anxiety wrapped inside the good news, like they need permission to be happy about it, or like they're testing whether you'll still like them. That leak is a tell. What you're actually seeing is envy disguised as status anxiety. When someone secretly envies you, they can't let a good thing about your life sit quietly. They have to diminish it, reframe it, anchor it to a problem. Your vacation becomes probably overrated. Your new relationship becomes, I'm glad you're distracted at least. They're not being mean so much as protecting themselves from the gap they feel between their life and yours. The leak shows up in comparisons you never asked for. They mention someone else's bigger house, better salary, more impressive degree the moment you share something good, or they suddenly become hyper-aware of all the ways what you have isn't that special. It's like they need to shrink your win down to human size, so the distance between you feels survivable. The real signal lives underneath the words themselves. It's the anxious energy. A genuinely happy friend celebrates without footnotes. An envious one celebrates and then immediately reaches for the small print, the caveat, the proof that it's not really as good as it looks. Next time someone responds to your win with unsolicited downsides, notice whether they seemed calm while saying it. Probably not. Excessive scrutiny of your choices. You make a small decision, a new job offer, a haircut, a weekend trip, and suddenly someone close to you has questions. A lot of them. Not the warm, curious kind. The kind where they're checking your math, doubting your reasoning, asking why you didn't consider other angles. They smile while they do it, but there's something underneath. That's scrutiny with teeth. Envy often hides as concern. When someone is quietly envious of you, they need to poke holes in your choices to feel less like they're watching someone win. If your job move is risky, your haircut is trendy, not timeless, your trip is irresponsible, suddenly they're not the one left behind. They're the careful one, the wise one. The evidence against your choice becomes evidence for their superiority. Watch for the pattern over weeks and months. Do they interrogate everyone's decisions equally, or do they zoom in on yours? Do they ask follow-up questions designed to expose weakness, or to actually understand? There's a real difference between, that sounds amazing, what made you choose that, and, but did you think about how that might look? One is genuine interest, the other is an audit. The real tell is what happens after the conversation ends. If they drop it once you've explained, they were genuinely curious. If they circle back, mentioning it in group chats, bringing up worst-case scenarios weeks later, turning it into a cautionary tale, they're still searching for the crack that proves you weren't as smart as you seemed. Envy doesn't rest easy with your win. It keeps digging. The delayed like online. You post something good, a win, a photo you look great in, a moment of pride. Your friend sees it within minutes. They don't like it. But then, 3 hours later, just before you're about to forget, it happened. The notification pings. They liked it. Why the delay? It's rarely about connection speed. There's a quiet friction in that pause. Research on social engagement shows us that people who feel threatened by your success often need time to process the discomfort before they can fake the support. That gap is the internal negotiation. Should I acknowledge this or pretend I didn't see it? How long can I wait without it looking cold? The delayed like is the tells-all whisper of someone wrestling with a compliment they don't quite feel. What makes it stick is that it happens every time with certain people, not once, not by accident. You start to notice the pattern. They'll engage quickly with ordinary posts, your lunch, your joke, your Tuesday mood, But when something touches genuine accomplishment or joy, that's when the 3-hour silence appears. Your brain clocks it. You may not say it aloud, but you feel it. The envy isn't usually hatred. It's closer to a small, sharp sting, the sting of watching someone else get what they want. And a delayed like is their way of saying congratulations without having to say it right away, without having to feel it fully. Next time you see that pause, know what it means. It's not about the platform. It's about the cost of saying yes to your happiness. Public praise, private coldness. You walk into a room and your colleague suddenly becomes loud about how great you are, in front of everyone. The boss hears it. Other people nod. Then you catch them later, alone, and they barely look at you. The warmth vanishes like it was never there. That flip is not a mood swing. It's a tell. Envy wears a spotlight mask in public because an envious person needs witnesses. They want people to see them as generous, secure, unconcerned, exactly the opposite of what they actually feel. But the audience matters. Without it, the performance ends. Watch what happens when the room empties. The smile goes flat. The tone cools. Suddenly, they have nothing to prove. This pattern works because it protects them both ways. If you call out the coldness, they can point to all those public compliments and make you look paranoid. If you appreciate the praise, they get credit for being kind while their private behavior sends the real message. You do not deserve warmth from me. It is the perfect cover. The thing to notice is the pattern itself, not just one moment. One compliment followed by distance could be coincidence. But if it happens repeatedly, praise when others are around, distance when they are not, you are looking at someone managing an image, not expressing genuine regard. That gap between public and private self is where envy hides. Do not confront it directly. You will lose every time. Instead, start tracking when they warm and when they cool, and let that knowledge sit quietly inside you. You will need fewer of their compliments once you see what they actually cost. The one-sided rivalry. You know that person who treats every conversation like a scoreboard? They ask how your project went, then immediately pivot to how theirs was harder, bigger, or somehow more complex. Nothing you say sits with them. It just becomes a launching pad for their own story, told louder. That's the one-sided rivalry in motion, a competition only one person is consciously playing. The strange part is how invisible it feels at first. They're smiling, they're asking questions, but underneath, there's a constant measuring, and you're always the thing being measured against. If you got a promotion, they're already talking about the one they turned down. If you lost weight, they mention their metabolism used to be like that too. They're not celebrating, they're recalibrating. What makes this so revealing is the exhaustion it creates in you. Real friendships feel like they can breathe. This one, you leave drained because there's no room for your wins to just exist. They have to be contextualized, minimized, or challenged within seconds. You're not imagining that sensation. You're sensing the envy doing its work underneath. The pattern is the real signal. Does this happen with one specific person across every topic, or just once in a while? If it's the same person, reliably, every time, you've found someone who sees you as a competitor, whether you signed up for it or not. They may never admit the rivalry, but their nervous need to level the playing field speaks volumes. The kindest move is often the simplest. Stop offering them the scorecard. Let them sit with why you stopped keeping score. Suddenly critical of your circle, you mention a friend or partner did something kind, and they pause, then ask why you hang around that person anyway. They weren't like this before. A month ago, they were fine with your crew. Now they find problems with everyone in your life. Too fake, too needy, not interesting enough, always showing off. The timing is strange. Nothing about your circle actually changed. What shifts them? Envy moves sideways sometimes. If they can't diminish you directly without sounding petty, they attack the people around you instead. The logic is brutal and mostly unconscious. If everyone in your orbit is actually shallow or suspect, then being close to you becomes less enviable. The win stays in your pocket, but the people holding it get smaller. Listen for the pattern more than the words. One critique is an opinion, a sudden campaign against your whole network, your partner, your best friend, your work crew that landed differently before. That is noise covering something. They are trying to make the ground around you look like quicksand so you will second guess what you have. The tricky part is that sometimes they sound almost concerned, like they are protecting you. But real concern doesn't poison everyone around you at once. It doesn't need to. Real concern names a specific boundary and then lets you breathe. This doesn't. It just keeps circling. Next time you hear it, notice what they leave out. They rarely explain why these people are bad for you exactly, just that they are. That vagueness is your signal. They are not trying to help. They are trying to make you doubt the very thing that made them envious in the first place, the recognition withholding. You tell someone close to you about a win, a promotion, a piece of work you're proud of, a boundary you finally set, and instead of the normal human thing, a smile, a question, genuine interest, you get silence, or worse, a pivot. They change the subject so fast you barely register it happened. A few weeks later, you mention the same achievement to someone else, and that person lights up, asks follow-up questions, seems genuinely glad. The difference stings in a way you can't quite name. What you are watching is selective attention as a weapon. The envious person sees your good thing and cannot afford to celebrate it, not because they lack manners, but because acknowledging your success feels like admitting their own standing has slipped. So they starve it of oxygen. No comment, no follow-up, no reflection back to you that says, I see you. Instead, they give you the invisible hand. This withholding is rarely about malice. It is about self-protection. If they do not name it, it does not exist. If they do not feed it with interest or enthusiasm, maybe it will not make them feel smaller. But for you, the effect is real. You lose the social mirror you needed. Your own accomplishment feels less real because the people closest to you refuse to reflect it back. Notice who celebrates you without reservation and who makes your wins feel like a thing to apologize for. That gap is not noise. It is data about where the real envy lives and where the real warmth does too. Reframing luck over skill. Your friend gets the promotion. They smile and say, I just got lucky with the timing. But you were there in the meetings. You saw them prepare, stay late, build relationships. What they just did, subtly shrinking their own role in their win, is a quiet tell. Envious people do this constantly, almost without thinking. Here's why it matters. When someone consistently credits their own wins to chance and yours to advantage, they're doing something clever. They're protecting themselves. If your success was luck, theirs can be too. If theirs was luck, they're not behind. They're just waiting for their turn. The reframe keeps score equal in their mind, even when reality says otherwise. You'll notice this pattern sharpens when stakes are close. They got into the same grad program as you? Must be random selection that year. They landed the same client you did? Timing worked out. But their failures? Suddenly skill re-enters the conversation. The market was brutal. bad luck. No one could have seen it coming. Watch how the frame bends to fit the story they need. This is envy's favorite hiding place, in the word luck. It lets someone stay friendly while subtly refusing to see you as capable. And that refusal, it's often a sign they feel threatened by what you actually did. The next time you hear this pattern, notice it without judgment. It's less about you and more about the gap they feel between where they are and where they see you. Your move is simple. Keep crediting the real work, yours and theirs. Don't argue the point. Just stay clear with yourself about what actually happened. The envy stare tell. You're telling a story about a win, nothing huge, just something you're proud of, and someone's eyes lock onto you for a beat longer than feels natural. Not warm, not angry either. It's a kind of stillness, a pause where they seem to be studying you the way you study a scratch on your own car. That micro stare is worth noticing. Envy has its own look, and it's different from admiration or genuine happiness. Admiration has softness in it, a kind of openness. Envy is tighter. The eyes narrow slightly, or they flatten. Sometimes the person doesn't blink. They're not celebrating what you said. They're measuring you against some internal scoreboard where your point just went up and theirs stayed the same. What makes this tell so reliable is that it happens before the smile kicks in. The face reveals the true reaction first, and then the social mask slides down over it. If you're paying attention, and most people aren't, you'll see the flash of something sharp before the "that's amazing, I'm so happy for you" arrives. The words are theater. The stare is honest. The real kicker is what follows. Do they ask genuine questions, or do they redirect to themselves? Do they linger on your success, or move past it quickly? When the envy stare is followed by a closing off, a shift in energy, a retreat, that's not coincidence. That's someone adjusting their walls because you just reminded them of what they wish they had. Train yourself to notice this without judgment. You're calibrating who can actually sit with your good news and who's doing emotional math instead, bragging to match you. You mention a promotion. 3 minutes later, they're telling you about their raise from 6 months ago, the one they never brought up before. It's not a conversation. It's a scoreboard suddenly being displayed. When someone's quietly envious, they often can't let your good news just sit there. They need to neutralize it to prove they're in the same league or higher. The tell isn't aggression, it's speed. An envious person will scramble to produce a counterexample, usually something slightly bigger or more recent or more impressive sounding. If they were genuinely happy for you, they'd just be happy. But envy carries a twitch, an automatic reflex to restore the invisible hierarchy they feel slipping. The response feels urgent because, to them, it is. Watch the specificity too. They don't just mention something good. They often add unnecessary details. The exact amount, the fancy restaurant, the company's size. Real accomplishment usually doesn't need that much decoration. Real confidence is quieter. The elaborate version is armor, a defense mechanism designed to make you believe they're untouched by your win. This matters because it tells you something they need you to believe, that they're not actually below you. That comparison matters to them, that your good news registered as a threat instead of a moment to genuinely celebrate. Not every person who brags is envious, sure. Some are just loud and always have been, but the ones who brag in response to your news, that's a different animal entirely, one operating from a place of comparison rather than genuine sharing. Next time it happens, notice whether they're celebrating themselves or defending themselves. The difference is almost everything. The subtle sabotage setup. Your coworker suggests you pitch that idea in the meeting, but the morning of, she casually mentions she ran into your boss at coffee and mentioned you had been stressed lately. Nothing wrong with that sentence, right? Except now your boss is primed to see you as frazzled before you've even spoken. That is the sabotage setup, a kind act wrapped around a small knife. The envious person rarely blocks your path directly. Instead, they helpfully point out the potholes they hope you'll step in. They volunteer to introduce you to someone, then mention a story that makes you sound less impressive. They encourage you to take a risk, then sit back and watch the machinery grind. The genius of it is the deniability. They can always say they were rooting for you. What makes this pattern work is timing and witnesses. They often set it up just before a moment that matters, a presentation, a date, a conversation with someone important, and they frequently do it in front of observers or mention it to someone who will pass it along. The setup requires an audience, even a small one, to generate the damage they want. The trap for you is second-guessing your own reading of it. You notice the pattern, but it was so gentle, so helpful on the surface, that you wonder if you are being paranoid. You are not. Envy that moves this quietly is envy that has thought about it. Trust that instinct. And the move? Stop giving them the front row seat to your next big moment. Not rudely, just privately, feigned indifference to your news. You tell someone close about a win, a job offer, a relationship milestone, a thing you built, and their face does something strange. They nod. They say cool or nice, but the words arrive flat, like they're reading from a script written in another language. The temperature of the room doesn't change. No real questions follow. They shift the subject faster than feels natural, as if staying in that moment costs them something. What you're watching is the tax of proximity. When someone feels envious, showing genuine enthusiasm for your good news becomes a small ache, so they protect themselves by offering indifference as a shield instead. The smile stays, the words happen, but there's no electricity behind them. Because real electricity would mean admitting they wanted what you got, and that admission feels like defeat. The trick is noticing the gap between the gesture and the feeling. A person who is actually glad for you leans in. They ask the next question. They remember the detail later and bring it back up unprompted. An envious person who's trying to hide it does the opposite. They deliver the bare minimum and leave. It's not usually cruelty. It's the friction of watching someone else cross a finish line you're still running toward. Pay attention to who actually stays curious about your life when it's good. That person is not wrestling themselves to be there for you. Everyone else is managing something harder than joy. And that silence tells you everything about where the real distance lives. The competitive gift giving. You give someone a thoughtful birthday gift, something personal, something you really considered. A few weeks later, they give you something back. Not for your birthday, not for any occasion, just suddenly. And it's bigger, flashier, more expensive than yours ever was. They smile when they hand it over, but you can feel the scoreboard being updated. This is gift giving as a chess move. When someone secretly envies you, gifts stop being about generosity and start being about settling a score. You give a handmade candle. They come back with something luxury. You pick something thoughtful. They pick something that costs more. Every exchange becomes a quiet auction where the real currency isn't gratitude. It's proof. The motive underneath is almost always the same. I can do this better than you. They've noticed something you have: confidence, taste, attention to detail, even just the ability to choose well for others. And it stings. So the gift becomes a way to flip the script, to show they are the generous one, the thoughtful one. The trick is that this almost never feels warm. Even if they wrap it beautifully, there's a current underneath, a need to win. And if you accept it gracefully, they'll often follow up with a comment. I saw it and had to get it for you, as if you needed reminding of their gesture. If you spot this pattern, don't match their escalation. Keep giving what you meant to give. The envious person will feel it most when you're not competing at all, downgrading your happiness. You just landed something good, a new role, a relationship you are proud of, a win that felt real. You call someone you thought was close to you, and their first move is to soften it. That's nice, but the salary probably doesn't account for inflation. Yeah, but wait until you hit the reality check of that job. Relationships are easy at the start, though, aren't they? They are not congratulating you. They are editing your joy down to size. What you are witnessing is envy dressed up as realism. The envious person cannot let your good thing stay good, not because they hate you, but because your unfiltered happiness sits like a mirror, reflecting back what they don't have. So they reach for the nearest wet cloth and wipe the shine off, not with cruelty always, but with that practiced tone, concern disguised as wisdom, protection dressed up as truth. Here is what makes it truly stick. Part of you actually believes them. They sound thoughtful, protective even. So you walk away from your own good news a little smaller, a little less sure, wondering if you missed something obvious. That was the entire point. An envious person who can make you doubt your own win has leveled the playing field and convinced you to do half their work for them. The next time someone meets your news with a preemptive reality check instead of actual joy, pause and notice it, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. Your happiness does not need their permission or their scrutiny. Let them keep their downgrades. You earned the full, unedited version, the whispered comparison. You mention you got a promotion. They say, "Oh, that's nice. My old job had great benefits too. Notice what just happened?" They didn't ask about your role. They didn't celebrate. Instead, they rotated the spotlight onto their own past, their own version of achievement, anything but genuine curiosity about what you actually have now. Envy does this thing where it can't let your moment exist on its own. So the envious person sprinkles in a comparison, always framed as casual or helpful. Your place is lovely. We looked at something similar but decided the neighborhood wasn't quite right for us. Translation: I found a flaw in your good thing because I needed to diminish it. What makes this sign so sticky is that it's plausibly deniable. They can always say they were just sharing experience or making conversation, but if you notice it happening across small moments, every win gets a counterpoint, every joy gets a shadow story. You're probably seeing someone whose envy is trying to level the ground beneath your feet. The thing to watch for is the pattern, not the single comment. One comparison is nothing, but a friend who never lets your good news sit alone, who always has a similar story to soften yours, who mentions how it went for them before it's even finished going for you. That's a person managing their own feelings by managing your certainty in yours, avoiding your success topics. You mention a win, the job offer, the relationship milestone, the thing you worked for, and their face flattens, not thoughtful listening, a real exit. They redirect to their own story fast, or they ask nothing at all. A friend who cares leans in. One carrying envy pivots away. What happens in that moment is a small wound showing up. Your good news becomes evidence of something they want badly, but don't yet have. Their brain recoils the way it does when something stings. It looks away. The conversation shifts from celebration into a place where they manage their own hurt instead of holding space for yours. Watch for the pattern across time. Promotion comes up, quiet. A trip to somewhere they've always dreamed of, suddenly exhausted. This isn't random inattention. It's a reliable flinch away from exactly the topics where you flourish. They'll happily ask about your doubts, your setbacks, your doubts. But victories land differently. They fall flat. The questions vanish. Here's the thing that catches most people. They don't even realize they're doing it. Envy doesn't announce itself with teeth. It works through subject changes and through what doesn't get asked about. Pay attention not just to what they engage with, but to what they avoid hearing. That silence around your wins carries real information, and knowing the difference between a true friend and someone performing the role changes what you build next. The mood shift trigger, you mention a win, a promotion, a vacation, a new relationship. Their face doesn't move, but something does. The brightness drains. They ask a follow-up question, but it lands hollow, like they're reading from a script someone else wrote. What you've just watched is them hitting their own ceiling by proxy. Envy lives in the gap between what someone has and what they want. When you step into that want space, the temperature shifts. Not anger yet, just a sudden cold that runs through the room. The smile stays bolted in place. The warmth leaves. It's the difference between hearing congratulations and watching someone manage their own disappointment in real time. What makes this moment so reliable as a signal is that it's involuntary. You can perform enthusiasm all day long, but you usually can't perform the speed at which you snap back into it. An envious person recovers fast. They've had practice. But that first sliver of a second before the mask locks back on is honest. They're grieving something they don't have, and your good news just made it visible. The quiet truth, this doesn't make them bad, and it doesn't mean they're sabotaging you. It means you've touched a tender spot they rarely admit to themselves. But if you start noticing the pattern, the brief flattening, the effort it takes to recover, then the slow drift away, you're watching someone process their own want through your success. That's worth noting, not to judge them, but to know who truly has your back, highlighting their sacrifices. You mentioned you got the promotion, and suddenly they're telling you about the 2 jobs they worked to pay for their apartment. You talk about your vacation, and they bring up the years they skipped holidays to save money. Nothing you say lands without a counter, not as a joke, but as a quiet reminder that they've earned something harder. It happens every single time you share a win. What's happening underneath is a subtle inversion. They're not celebrating alongside you. They're positioning themselves as the one who deserves more credit. Every sacrifice they mention is a weights and measures moment. I gave up X, so I should have Y by now. When someone keeps bringing up their own suffering, it's often because they're locked in a constant tally, comparing your gain against what they believe they've already sacrificed for. The thing is, actual sacrifice doesn't need an audience. Someone genuinely proud of their hard choices might mention them once in real context, but when someone keeps volunteering their struggle story whenever you have good news, they're doing emotional accounting. trying to prove to you and themselves that your win isn't as legitimate, or that their lack of one isn't their fault. Here's what matters. This person is stuck comparing their effort to your outcome as if life were a simple equation of hours worked equals rewards earned. But life isn't a ledger. Their resentment is evidence they're measuring themselves against you instead of their own path. Notice the pattern, stay kind, but don't let their scorecard become the way you see yourself. The subtle social exclusion. You get the text chain, but always just a beat late. By the time you see it, they're already at the bar, already 3 drinks deep, already laughing at jokes you'll never quite land the way they did. And when you mention you didn't see the earlier messages, a flicker of something crosses their face. Not guilt, relief. Envy does this thing where it bundles itself up as carelessness. They forgot to add you to the group chat. The invitation got lost in the shuffle. They didn't think you'd be interested in this one. Each excuse is plausible on its own, but the pattern is the message. They're curating your absence, one small exclusion at a time. What makes this move so effective from an envious person's angle is the built-in deniability. They can't be accused of doing anything overtly wrong. You can't point to a single moment and say, that's malice. It's all implied, which makes it twice as sharp. You're left wondering if you're imagining it, while they get to feel superior without ever lifting a finger to hurt you directly. The quiet truth underneath, some people exclude because they're protecting their ego. If you're not there, they don't have to feel small around your success. You can't outshine them if you're not in the room. Watch for the pattern, not the excuse. If someone keeps finding reasons you don't quite make the cut, they're telling you something without saying a word, and you're allowed to believe them.